Hello, everyone. My name is Miguel Myers. Welcome to My Horror Confessional, where every week I will have a guest come on and talk about one classic horror movie that they haven't seen and why. Welcome to season 3. We just wrapped up season number 2 of My Horror Confessional / My 70s Confessional with Anthony Jerome M. And that was an absolute blast. It was a great experiment that I had, and Anthony and I had a fun time talking about all those 70s movies, and we grew closer as friends, and that was great. But now we're back to the original, or now we're back to the normal format of the show. We're gonna be discussing the movie, the actors, and probably get off topic quite a bit. Once I believe that they have properly atoned, I will absolve them of their horror movie sin. Today we have Ryan C. Bradley, author of the recently released Saint's Blood through Saint Rooster Books, and he's also the co-host of a great horror podcast called Horror Hangover with Cass Clark. I recently had the delight of interviewing Ryan for my Patreon show, where we talked about his book and the process of writing it and his inspiration for it and other topics. If that sounds like something you'd be interested in listening to, please subscribe to the Patreon. Links are in the show notes or in my bio. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on the show. Glad to have you here.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, Miguel. All y'all listening at home, definitely subscribe to the Patreon. I did, and it's been a lot of fun.
Thank you very much, Ryan. I appreciate that. I actually, by the time I interviewed you for the Patreon, I had only gone through maybe half of the book. I made it to the first intermission. I don't know where that leads as far as percentage-wise. But then afterwards, I took a trip, and I'm a slow reader. So nothing to do with your book, but it took me a while to finish it. But when I finished it, when I got to that last third of the book, I couldn't put it down. It was so much fun. So I wanted to congratulate you on a really great book and a really fun book.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I know we talked about it a little bit on the Patreon, what the book was about and all that, but if you could please tell my listeners now, what the book is about and all that.
So Richie is a college professor, and the main character in my book, he's on an end of semester bender, and he gets kidnapped at a bar. And he wakes up and he's tied to a chair, and these people in the masks of ex-Republican presidents, I think one of them was a current Republican president while I was writing the book. And they're just drawing his blood every day, and he doesn't know what they're using the blood for. And so the book is about him trying to figure out what they're using the blood for and trying to kind of get away before he's too anemic to move.
Yeah, and like I said, the last time I interviewed you, I hadn't met the mother character yet.
Yeah.
And she is a great addition to the cast of villains you have here.
Thank you.
She is scary, right? She's very religious, and she uses the Bible to like for her means,
Yeah.
She twists the words and all that sort of stuff. And those are the scariest kind of people.
Thank you. Yeah, she was a lot of fun to write and a challenge, but good. I'm glad it came out well.
Was there any what were the inspirations for that character? Was there anything from your life, or was it purely, made up?
I mean, so my parents sent me to an all-boys Catholic high school.
Okay.
Against my will. So I met a lot of very religious people during that time. I was also very religious during that time, not so much anymore. But I feel like a lot of that time in my life came through in Saint's Blood. It's like one of the things that we did at the Catholic boys high school was like we had religion classes, and they would try to make it interesting by telling us like real stories about saints getting martyred. Uh-huh. And the strange things that happened when they were murdered, which is a huge influence on the book, obviously. And then just meeting a lot of people, and some of them, I do think there's people who are Christian who like actually try to follow the golden rule and stuff. And I think there's people who do what Mama does and try to manipulate it to basically justify whatever they're doing as the right thing.
Yeah.
Although in defense of her character, I think she inherited an impossible situation.
I mean, yeah, she definitely walked into the situation, but then made it worse.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the choices she made in the situation definitely made it worse. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think in her situation, like she had to choose between her kids and a stranger.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. So Again, the last time we talked on the Patreon episode, you were going to a book festival or something of that nature in Oklahoma. How did that go for you?
So I read at Magic City Books in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I brought 19 copies of the book, and I sold 19 copies of the book. So
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
it went really good. No complaints here.
Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, if I brought 22 copies, I could have sold 22 copies. I think
Yeah,
I just
that's
didn't
a
have
great feeling.
more.
That must be a great feeling, right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think I told you on the Patreon too. Like when I originally like had gotten an agreement to publish the book, I was like, okay, I'm gonna sell like a copy to my mom. Um, so every time I sell a copy to someone that's not my mother, I'm like, damn, this is great.
I mean, success comes in many forms, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So, um, what we typically do on the show is I ask people what their history is with horror. So, did you grow up loving it? Did you grow up hating it? Like that sort of thing. Also, like what was your family like around horror?
So when I was 5 years old, I hung out in my friend's basement all the time, and we would flip channels. And one day we got Hellraiser 3, and I haven't seen every Hellraiser movie. I've seen the first three for sure, and like bits of the other ones on TV. I think there is, in my estimation, one good scene in Hellraiser 3. It's when Pinhead is in this room full of candles, and he cuts a promo about how like uh, it's like the pain of your friends is like razor wire on violin strings, and it's this really great horror speech. But so I was like 5 years old and I saw that, and I had nightmares for months, and I wouldn't tell my parents about it because I was like scared. I couldn't go to the bathroom by myself anymore. We had to have someone come out and stand outside the door again. I really regressed after seeing that speech. Um, but yeah, so that was like my first real horror experience. And then I grew up watching The Twilight Zone, which to my mother was like the scariest thing. So if I had The Twilight Zone on, whatever she was doing, she was always doing chores, but she would like find like whatever chore and she would do it as loud as she could to drown out the sounds of The Twilight Zone. Then like
Because she hated it.
because she was too scared.
Okay, all right.
She would get too scared if she heard it. So she would just like whatever she was doing, she would just do it as loud as possible so she wouldn't have to hear it, which made it hard for me to hear.
This is the old black and white version.
The old black and
Or-
white version, yeah,
Okay, okay,
the
all right.
original version.
So I want to hear more, but I have to interrupt you real quick.
Yeah,
This American, you're aware of This American Life, the podcast
yeah,
or show, whatever, NPR show. A friend of mine sent me a clip from one of their, I don't know how recent the show is, but it was like a little 8-minute segment. And it was about this one time in Houston, Texas, where I think there was it was in a school, and 4 teachers got together and planned to show a movie to 4 classes of kids around Halloween, and it turned out to be Leprechaun, the original Leprechaun
yeah,
with Jennifer Aniston. But these are like sixth graders, or I think they were even younger, like 4th graders, and the teachers had never seen the movie. They just thought it was just like a kiddie friendly horror movie. So they put the movie on and then just left and went and did teacher shit, probably had a smoke and coffee or whatever. And they came back halfway through and like half the classes were crying and like half the class was like, oh, hell yeah, this is awesome. And the half that was crying, she's like, you guys can go wait outside on the steps of the school or whatever. And so they went to the steps of the school and they waited for the movie to come back or to finish. Then they came back and the teacher's like, I don't know why you're so scared. Like you guys are being, I mean, basically saying you're being pussies. And then they had to deal with the fallout of like teachers, parents calling the teachers and be like, yo, what the fuck, what are you doing? And then they were interviewing some of the kids. And one of the kids was like, yeah, I was terrified. For months afterwards, I would have nightmares, and my mom would have to be with me everywhere I went, including in the bathroom when I would have to take a shower. She would have to hold my hands, and like it was basically what you were saying right now happened to
yeah.
you, happened to like 40 kids all at once, because of Leprechaun. And I literally just heard that episode yesterday. I'll link it in the show notes
Yeah.
just so people can listen to it. It's hilarious. So I just, when you said that, I was like, holy shit, Ryan would have been, if Ryan was in this
I would
class,
have been in that class.
yeah, you
Although
would
I
have had
want
the
to
same
just like
experience.
defend Baby Ryan and say like I think Pinhead is way scarier than Leprechaun.
Okay, I'll give you that. That's true. Okay, so I'm sorry. So I interrupted you, but
Yeah.
you were telling me about growing up with horror in your life.
Yeah. So my neighbor Carla Nunez was allowed to watch horror movies, and I wasn't. And she was like a year or two older. So she would like we would go to they had this like basketball court. It wasn't like a real court, but like it was like maybe 6 feet long, and there was a hoop, so you could like shoot free throws basically in their backyard. I would go there and I would sit there, and she would tell me the plots of horror movies, and I loved it. I wasn't allowed to watch them, but I'd go to the library and they had like black and white books of Frankenstein and Dracula, like little kiddie books, and I really like more about the production of the movie than like the plot of the movie.
Yeah.
But I like devoured all this stuff, but I wasn't allowed to actually watch any horror movies.
That's funny.
In middle school, I saw, maybe it was high school, I saw The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and that one scared the shit out of me. Because like I said before, I was a really religious teenager, because like the all boys Catholic high school stuff.
Yeah.
And so I thought like that was real, and I had to like pray a certain number of times to stop the demon from getting me. Scared the shit out of me.
Well, that is a huge ramp up from not watching horror movies a lot to like The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
Yeah, it was a big jump. And then I didn't do much with them. I read a lot of horror books in high school. Dracula, Dorian Gray, a lot of Stephen King. Then college came, and I decided I wanted to be a horror writer. I started taking creative writing classes, and they were just all like, we're only going to do literary fiction. So I kind of put horror on the back burner for a while until my year between college and grad school. And then even in college, I watched some horror movies. My last year of grad school, I've been doing literary fiction for like 5 to 6 years. And I was just like, fuck it. Like, I don't want to be doing this. I don't want to write like sad stories about middle-aged people getting divorces and cancer. That's not going to be my life. And so I found the list of Time Out's top 100 horror movies, and I watched them all in like a 2-month period.
Holy shit.
I just like really went at it. Some of them were hard to find. Emerson, where I went to grad school, has a great film program, so they had a great library, so I could get a lot of like harder to find horror movies through them.
Yeah.
And after that, I kept going, and I kept like, at this point, my goal is to just be like a horror encyclopedia. I want to be able to like, someone says like, oh, this is a movie from 1973. I'm like, yeah, that one. I want to have that kind of knowledge. I'm doing it with the literature too. I'm trying to just like fully immerse and really get into it as of like 2014. I mean, that's 2015, 2016. I'll start writing for Wicked Horror that year. I've been writing for them since. I've written for a bunch of different horror outlets since then. Dread Central, Diabolique. Council of Zoom isn't quite horror, but they do some horror stuff.
And then you decided to launch a horror podcast.
Yes, yeah, with Cass, who I met at Emerson. They've also, I think they're more of a lifelong horror fan. Where I think like I'm kind of a lifelong horror fan, but I had like these big off periods. But now I'm on. I'm trying to just be an expert.
So where did the idea for the podcast come from?
From Cass. They came up with everything. They came to me and they're like, hey, do you want to do this? And like, Cass is brilliant. So like if Cass has an idea, I'm all for it every time. They're smarter than I am. So whenever I hear like they have an idea, I'm like, yeah, let's do it. You're going to crush it. I will carry along. I'll go with you.
So tell my listeners what you guys kind of do at Horror Hangover.
So at Horror Hangover, we take a trope or a subgenre, and we do a history. So like we did an episode of animal attacks. There are too many movies with animal attacks, by the way, and so it's a very long history in that episode. But we go through like a history, and we talk about two exemplary films. Like for Animal Attacks, we talked about the birds and Cujo. We kind of examine like, okay, what's working well and what's not working well in these movies. Normally, with a guest for the Animal Attack episode, we had a veterinarian, Donna Leahy, who's also a co-host of Beyond the Cabin in the Woods, come on.
Oh, I didn't realize. I guess I didn't realize she was also a podcast co-host. So I definitely
Yeah,
have to look up that episode or that podcast because she was a lot of fun on that. Like
yeah,
she was
she's
like
great.
just throwing out like veterinary facts about Cujo, and we talked a little bit about this. But yeah, that was a really great episode.
Thank you.
And I've told you this before, and with you and Cass, like the work that you guys do, like um, researching the movie and all that sort of stuff. That's like after my own heart. That's the sort of shit that I love. So I really enjoy listening to your podcast, and I would recommend it to anybody.
Thank you. I feel the same way about your podcast.
Oh, look at that. We're vibing out. Look at that. All right. So, and how about so that was your history of horror, and I know you said you went through the Timeout 100 best horror movies.
Yeah.
What were a couple of standouts that you liked, and what was maybe your favorite one so far, or
So
what
I don't
is
know
your
about
favorite
like
one?
if I have a favorite. I have a favorite type of movie though.
Okay,
I
like
feel
a
like
genre.
Audition, The Vanishing, Don't Look Now all kind of fit into it. It's like a very slow start, typically with somebody who's grieving, and then they make a choice at some point, and it doesn't feel horrific. These are all like 2.5 hour long movies. I don't think anyone else likes this particular subgenre. It's just me. There's like 90 minutes where it's just like basically a straight drama, and the last hour or maybe even 15 minutes just something absolutely horrific happens. Like an audition, it's the piano wire and the noise that she makes, which is horrific.
Yeah.
I won't spoil The Vanishing or Don't Look Now. I think those ones are a little more obscure. Um, but I just love that like slow build and just violent crescendo at the very end kind of format. My wife hates
So,
them.
so something similar to like I feel like you and Ari Aster would be best friends.
Yes, I love Ari Aster's movies.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I love that sort of stuff too. I just recently saw Ken Russell's The Devils for the first time.
Yeah,
And there's not like really grieving in the beginning, but there is that. I mean, I love slow burns as
yeah.
well, and I love that nunsploitation sort of thing. I mean, there's nuns in it, and I love that sort of shit.
So for
Um,
me, that movie has this like weird history. It's like that was one of the top 100, and I got it from the Emerson Library, and this like weird like I don't think I had a case because the DVD was so old. I was like, that's a clear case, and I'm watching it. And my roommates aren't home, and I'd heard there's a scene called the Rape of Christ, right? You know that scene. It's like 100 nuns masturbating on top of a crucifix or around a crucifix.
okay, yes, yeah, yeah,
So it's that scene, and I was just watching the movie. Everything's peaceful. My roommates come in, like they get back from their shopping trip, and on the TV, there's just 100 nuns going to town on baby Jesus' feet. And I'm just having to explain, like, it's on the top 100 horror movies list. I'm not just sitting here watching nun porn on our common TV.
yeah. It's always the case. Hillary always, literally for that movie, she came in at the end of this. I don't want to spoil it for anybody because if you haven't seen it, it's a must see.
Yeah,
But the scene where the is it mother what's the head nun called
I don't remember. She's got like the bent
the
neck from being in that
yeah
room all the time.
the holy
Mother
shit.
Superior.
I didn't realize that the neck was because she was in that room all the time. I thought she was born like that.
I thought she was like that because she was
Wow.
punishing herself all the time.
No,
I don't know.
that might be the case. I haven't had a chance to read up on it, but yeah, you just brought another level of love of that movie to me. Like I literally saw it 2 days ago, so I haven't had a
Oh,
chance to check it out, but or to read about it. But anyway, the scene where she's being interrogated and then they bring out all the tools to interrogate her and all that.
yeah,
That's when Hillary decided to walk in. And I'm like, God damn it, it always happens. But
it does.
yeah, but yeah, like you're a person after my own heart because I love slow burns as well. Those are kind of some of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
Um, so those are some of the movies or the type of movie you liked, and you said you didn't really have a favorite movie. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't have a particular favorite. Like, I like Scream a lot. I like Possession a lot, with a really surreal one, not the Dybbuk one that John Baltusberger hates.
Oh,
Um,
Possession by the yeah,
I
with
can't
Sam
say his
Neill.
name.
Well, with
Andrzej
Sam,
Zurlowski, I
yeah,
think.
Zulowski and with Isabella Gianni and
Yeah, Sam
yeah,
Neill.
Sam Neill. Yeah. Oh yeah, that was my like third episode I did on the podcast. It's so fucking good. Amazing
Such a
movie.
good movie. Yeah,
Life-changing movie, you know. I like
absolutely.
there's life before possession and life after possession.
That's another one where I tried to show it to my partner Betsy, and she was just like, "Why are we watching this? What is this?" She was not at all interested. I think she fell asleep within the first hour.
Oh man. It's like it's like a brutal decay of a relationship like right in front of your eyes. On
Yeah.
top of that, there's a spoiler alert here. I'm going to give you 5 seconds. Five, four, three, two, one. Okay. There's also an octopus fucking a woman, like or a woman fucking an octopus, and it's like an octopus
Yeah.
monster sort of thing. It's like, where the fuck did that come from? But
I mean, it's
yeah,
definitely a symbolic monster. And I was like, is it symbolic of the divorce? But if it's symbolic of the divorce, why is she fucking the divorce?
right. And then in
Like,
the end, that monster turned into her husband, right? Because like
yeah,
that's
yeah, another him.
and then for him, his monster turned into her. Or I guess it didn't. Maybe we didn't see the process of the monster, but he met another woman. Yeah, we can have you back out for possession, but we can do that on a Patreon episode because I can literally talk about possession
I
for
do
hours.
have a question for you about possession, if it's okay if we just have
Yeah,
one more
hit me.
question.
Yeah, hit me.
Did you realize the first time you watched it, Sam Neill is a spy? Like his character is a spy for his government?
I
Because I watched
did.
the entire movie and I read a summary, and the first time it's like Sam Neill is a spy. Like what? I had no idea from watching the movie he was a spy.
I don't think it was portrayed very well. Um, but yeah, I did catch it, but also it was like here and gone sort of thing, you know.
Yeah,
And I know it comes back in the end, but I never found out what the pink socks represented.
no idea. I
Yeah,
have
I
no
didn't.
idea.
Yeah, Zulowski was like he's a complete asshole. He's a dickhead. What he did to Isabella Gianni making the movie was terrible.
Oh,
But he can fucking direct a movie. You know, like that happens with a lot of other directors that are terrible people. They
yeah,
still are good at their craft, which is But
frustrating.
all right. So today we're here to talk about, or actually, you're here to confess your sin
I'm here to
of
confess my
never
sin.
having watched The Eyes of Laura Mars from 1978. Is that correct?
That's correct. That is. It's been 7 months since my last confession. Actually, more like 12 years, 13 years. Um, so forgive me, Miguel, for I have horror sins.
Well, we'll see at the end if whether or not you've earned the forgiveness. We'll get there.
Okay.
But so I understand that you were saying that you didn't watch a lot of movies growing up, and you just fairly recently went through that 100 movies list, and probably this movie wasn't on there, which I completely understand. But
Yeah.
after that move, after you went through the 100 best movies, was there any particular reason this movie passed you by? Like, had you heard about it and then you just kept putting it off, or did you just hear about it and then you told me that you wanted to watch this one?
I'd heard about it a couple times. Um, yeah, just hadn't seen it. It just kind of boiled down to like too many movies, not enough time.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those ones that I had heard about. I've only seen it within the last 5 years,
Yeah.
and I had known that John Carpenter had done movies before Halloween. Obviously, I've seen Assault on Precinct 13, um, but I was like, oh, he just wrote this one, and I looked it up. And I was like, I'm not really interested in it. But then we used to have this uh, movie rental place called Vulcan Video here, and it was close by my house, and they had everything. And
Yeah.
one month, I just went through all John Carpenter's movies that I hadn't seen, and that was one of them. And I was really, really surprised at how much I loved this movie. It was really great.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
going into the movie, I just want to get a little bit an idea of how you were feeling for the movie, how you felt after you watched the movie.
After watching the movie, I feel conflicted.
Okay.
I feel like I enjoyed the first half, and I
Okay.
feel like the second half doesn't deliver what the first half kind of promises.
Hmm. And I think I have an explanation for that, and we can get to when we get there. But yeah, I agree with you. It's definitely an uneven movie, but it's a fun movie, and I love giallo movies, and this
Yeah,
was a an attempt at an American style giallo movie. Wasn't quite there. They didn't have all the style that the Italians have, and they also didn't have the blood the Italians use and the
yeah,
cinematography that they use and all that sort of stuff. So it was a poor imitation, but it's still I would still uh, label it as a giallo movie or a
for sure.
slasher or a thriller. So all right, so let's get started talking about The Eyes of Laura Mars. So this is starring Faye Dunaway as Laura Mars. Obviously, she's a legend. She was in
Yeah,
Chinatown, Bonnie and Clyde, Mommy Dearest, and Network. She actually won an Oscar for Network.
yeah.
Um, I have a really funny story, sidebar, for Network. I had never seen Network, and then my wife and I went to Cuba 3 or 4 years ago, and I'm obsessed with going with the locals. Like, I don't want to go to a resort or anything like that. I want to go with the locals, and I want to live like the locals live and all that. And one of the things I wanted to do was go to. I was deep into movie posters at the time, so they have like a cinema area of I think it's Calle Ocho, I think, and there was like movie theaters and posters and stuff like that. I was like, let's go watch a movie with regular everyday Cubans at this movie theater, and they were showing Network in Spanish with no English subtitles, just in Spanish. Which
Yeah.
I read, I'm I can read and speak Spanish. My wife can understand Spanish a little bit, but so we go into this tiny, maybe 20-person theater, and I think we paid like 50 cents for 2 tickets, and like we
Nice.
just saw Network with like 12 other older Cubans. They're all like
Yeah.
70 or they had like this whole like cinema club that they would go to.
Oh,
It
that's
was,
cool.
it was so great. And that's the only time I've seen Network was in Cuba with a bunch of older Cubans. So I really have an affinity for that movie.
It's a good movie.
Yeah, it was a great movie. I had a lot of fun. And there was one part where like they'd made fun of American exceptionalism or something like that in the movie. Like
Yeah.
and all the Cubans were like, yeah, or something like that, like, oh shit.
So when
Uh,
you see a Spanish language movie with Hillary, do you translate it for her?
well, typically we'll have the English
English
subtitles
subtitles,
on.
but for network you didn't have it. Did you see
Yeah, I
you
didn't have.
translate as it kind of as it went?
No, she just watched it.
Okay.
Yeah, she was just a trooper. She just watched it.
Yeah.
So then it's also starring, of course, the man, the myth, the legend, TLJ, Tommy Lee Jones,
Yeah.
as John Neville. Of course, he's from Fugitive, No Country for Old Men, Men in Black, and a host of other great movies. And then Brad Dourif as Tommy Ludlow. And of course, Brad does the voice. Well, he was in Child's Play, the first one,
Yeah.
and then he's done the voice of Chucky for the whole Chucky franchise and even the TV show, the recent TV show. He didn't do the voice of Chucky for the remake, right? That was a Star Wars guy.
Mark
Whatever his name.
Hamill.
Mark Hamill. Yeah. But then he's also been in like an Exorcist 3, and then he was
Yeah.
in Lord of the Rings. Like very, very recently, I'm starting to realize how much of a legend Brad Dourif is. Like
He
he's
really is.
he's so good. Like he's not the big name, but he's one of those character actors. When he gets into something, he fucking gets into it, and he shows the
Oh
fuck up.
yeah.
And he showed up in this movie. His
He
hair,
was
first of
great
all,
in this.
was a
Yeah.
character in and of itself.
His
Very handsome
eyes.
man. Yeah,
His eyes throughout this entire movie, he just had that like I'm about to break edge to him
yeah.
throughout the film that I thought was just really well done.
He's a great actor, along with like Robert England or
Yeah.
um, who plays Candyman. Um,
Tony Todd.
Tony Todd, like these Shakespearean actors, like these people are like theater actors that come in to do these horror movies, so you automatically elevate your movie with this type of type of actor. So I just have this newfound respect for Brad Dourif and everything he does. You know.
Yeah. I just want to say, like, Tony Todd, I feel like never gets the credit he deserves. Like, between, like, Candyman, Final Destination, I feel like he belongs up there with, like, Robert Englund when people talk about, like, horror icons with Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi. Because it's his body of work. It's so good. He's so good.
Oh yeah, agreed. Tony Todd is amazing. And that goes along with like Dwayne Jones from Night of the Living Dead. Like he was this
Yeah.
just theater actor, and William Marshall as well, who played
Yeah.
Blackula or Prince Mamuwalde in Blackula. Like these actors, like are sometimes they're above the movie, you know, but they're still in it,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
they're great. So shout out to all the actors that aren't as well known, and specifically Brad Dourif in this one. So
Yeah.
also starring Rene Auberjonois, I believe is how it's spelled, as Donald Phelps. He was the manager. Um, he was in MASH and The Patriot, and then of course Raul Julia as Michael Riesler. Obviously, he was in the Adams Family. He was a Gomez, and also M Bison from Street Fighter, the live action movie. He was this Puerto Rican actor, and I'm half Puerto Rican, so when I was growing up and seeing him, I just loved seeing him in movies.
Yeah.
He's an actor that died way too young. He died at the age of 80. He died at the age of 54 due to
Oof.
complications from a stroke, from due to stomach cancer. So rest in peace, Raul Julia. He was great in here. Like he stole the show in
Yeah.
the couple minutes in every scene that he was in. You know,
Absolutely.
yeah, he was great in this one. So directed by Irving Kershner, who did Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. I'm not a Star Wars fan. If you are you a Star Wars fan? Is that one of the better ones?
So I like Star Wars a lot. And that's probably my second favorite Star Wars movie.
Okay. Um, moving on. I can't talk a lot about Star Wars. But I did want to talk about the writing credit. So
Yeah.
there's a story first that I wanted to explain. So I did want to tell the story behind the writing credits for this movie, and I actually found a really good YouTube resource called Good Bad Flicks, and they had an episode on the Eyes of Laura Mars. It was about 20 minutes. It was very informative, and so I just want to tell that story. So in 1974. John Carpenter wrote Dark Star with his friend Dan O'Bannon of Alien fame, because
Yeah.
Dan O'Bannon would go on to write Alien. Afterwards, that was a critical and commercial flop. It's actually a really funny, really weird movie if you ever get a chance to see it. But afterwards, JC wrote two scripts. He wrote Assault on Precinct 13 and Eyes of Laura Mars, which at that time he just called Eyes. And producer Jack Harris optioned Eyes. Around here, a man named John Peters got into the industry. He was a hairstylist on Rodeo Drive, and he had a lot of famous clientele, one of which was Barbra Streisand. So they met and fell in love and married, and he became her manager, and he brought her the script for A Star is Born, which he went on to produce, and she went to star in and won Oscars and Golden Globes and all that sort of stuff. Afterwards, Peters met with Harris, who let him read the script for Eyes. He liked it as a vehicle for Barbra Streisand. They took that script to Columbia, who paid John Carpenter $20,000 for that script. And then Peters met with John Carpenter to rewrite the script to more closely fit what the image they wanted of Barbra Streisand. So that was the
Yeah.
first. That was the first rewrite. But afterwards, Carpenter didn't like the changes, so he left to go work on Assault on Precinct 13. After this, another bunch of rewrites was requested, with at least 9 different writers working on the script.
Oh wow.
During this time, Streisand recorded the theme song "Prisoner," um,
Yeah.
which we hear at the beginning of the end of the movie, and which is an absolute banger. At this point, she left the film because of the rewrites, because she felt it wasn't going in a direction in which she didn't want to be in one of "quote unquote" those types of movies, right?
Yeah.
So,
On the Wikipedia article, the word she used was kinky. She's quoted as saying the movie was too kinky.
really, oh, I didn't even read that. Okay, that's good to know. So, at this point, there were more rewrites requested without Barbra Streisand in mind. So then they brought in David Zellick Goodman, who wrote Straw Dogs, and they went through. So he did another rewrite, and so then they went through a couple directors before landing on Irwin Kershner, who eventually accepted only after being allowed to do another rewrite. So in the end, there were only two credited writers, John Carpenter and Kirchner, but even Tommy Lee Jones went uncredited as he wrote his dialogue for his end scene. There was possibly 10 writers on this movie or more.
Yeah.
So the movie was released August 2nd, 1978, and was a medium financial success, but a bit of a bomb critically. However, Halloween was released just over 2 months later, October 27th, 1978. John Carpenter's life and the history of cinema was changed forever. So that's a bit of the background of the story of how this story came to be. And so I know that this is known as like a John Carpenter film, but after reading that and after watching it, like I don't feel much John Carpenter. There's a small part of John Carpenter in it
Yeah.
in the beginning, but towards the end,
Yeah.
like
Especially.
completely changes ending, like you're saying. So how did you
Yeah.
feel like that?
I felt like I think you can feel all the different writers. I think very frequently you'll see movies and they'll have actually gone through a similar process. I think this happens to more movies than not. But I think especially in this movie, because I think the beginning of this film is kind of fascinating, where they start talking about like, "We'll use murder to sell deodorant" is one of the lines, and
Yeah,
she's walking in and he gets all these interesting questions about like, "Are you encouraging violence against women with what you're doing with these photographs?" And so I feel like it's setting up for the rest of the movie is going to examine like how these photographs play into it and how like what is Faye Dunaway's responsibility, her character Laura Mars' responsibility, and that kind of just gets dropped about halfway through, and we don't hear anything else about it again. I think there's a scene where she shows Tommy Lee Jones' character, the killer. Sorry, that's a spoiler for y'all listening from home. But she shows Neville's character like this is what it looks like when I see it through a camera. And so the point of view shot, is looking through a camera and seeing what a point of view shot looks like. And I think a lot of that stuff is fascinating, especially in the context of like, if you were to talk about an American movie that really popularized point of view shots, it would be John Carpenter's movie from the same year, Halloween.
right.
So seeing John Carpenter reflexively kind of break that down and analyze is fascinating, and it kind of just disappears after like the 45-minute mark, probably.
Yeah, and then like you're saying, Carpenter is famously known for using a POV shot with the beginning of Halloween, and throughout the movie. He used it in the beginning of this movie as well, and then they changed the ending of his movie. He wanted it to be just a random person, and you don't know what their actions were, why they started doing this killing. And of course Kirshner didn't like that, so he changed it to what we have in the movie now. And then with the Halloween franchise, that's what Carpenter originally wanted, was just a random person choosing random people to kill. But then when they had to do part two and they threw all this money at him, he's like, okay, he had to make up this reason why Myers would continue to come after Laurie, and so he did the whole brother sister sort of thing. But he's always regretted that. He's always hated it, and that's why they changed it up with this newest iteration of the Halloween franchise. So that's definitely something you can see in this movie.
Yeah.
Like you're saying in the beginning, that's what he wanted, but then they changed it up at the end there. So all right. So then, as I talked about earlier, this is an example of American giallo. We've talked about giallo multiple times here. My episode with Gerardo Preciado, where we talked about Dario Argento's Deep Red or Profondo Rosso, and my episode in season 2 of My 70s Confessional with Anthony Jerome M, where we talked about Sergio Martino's Torso. So if you want to hear more about the history of that genre, take a listen to those episodes. Okay. So the movie starts with an absolute bop. I had no idea who sang the song. I had to
Yeah.
look it up, and I was surprised that it was Barbara Streisand. I was like, oh shit, like I haven't heard a lot of Barbara Streisand songs. I was like, this is good. I
Yeah,
like
I
it.
feel like I've mostly heard her like in Yentl, and like that kind of stuff. Like she's singing in her movies.
I haven't even seen Yentl. I don't. The only
That's
reason I
good.
know more, the only thing I know Barbara Streisand as an actress is Meet the Fuckers, right?
She's good in that. Yeah.
Yeah, she was funny in that one, but like I am uncultured in the ways of Barbara Streisand, so I apologize
That's
about
all
that.
good.
Um,
I do have a question about horror movie specifically written bops. If
Okay.
you could add one power ballad sung in the style of Barbra Streisand to the opening and closing of any horror movie, what would you add it to?
So now I would add this song to every movie, but
You
now I got
Prisoners at the beginning and end of every movie.
let's see. I got to look up some of her songs here. Woman in Love, Guilty, I Finally Found Someone, The Way We Were, and Evergreen. I haven't seen A Star Is Born. Have you?
I've seen the Bradley Cooper remake,
Okay.
but none of the originals. I think it was like the third time that story got remade when they did The Star Is Born.
Yeah, like there's one from the 50s or 40s, the one with her, and then let me hear A Woman in Love real quick. Let me see.
Okay, yeah.
1 minute later.
Yo, that song is dope. A Woman in Love. She got an album with like Barry Gibb from
The Bee Gees, right?
the Bee Gees. Yeah, I gotta listen to that album. So I'm gonna say we're gonna put "Woman in Love" at the beginning of the Vavitch,
Yeah, yeah. I
and
love it.
that's how we end it. And that's how we end it as well. Right? How about you? What would you put?
Green Room obviously needs a Barbra Streisand ballad. I don't. Maybe Papa, Can You Hear Me from Yentl?
That'd be
It'd be the
just
worst
like
thing ever. The worst
Green
thing
Room.
ever.
Green Room was a great movie. That's a great
Oh
movie.
yeah, absolutely.
So then the image we see is an extreme close up of an eye, and I'm like, I wonder whose eyes they are, and that pulls out to reveal a pair of eyes, and it's basically the key art for the movie. We see it on the posters, on the book. I have the novelization of it because I collect. I have a sickness where I collect everything Halloween, including anything John Carpenter has done.
Yeah.
So I had to get the novelization for The Eyes of Lord Mars for some reason. So
Did you read it?
I haven't read it yet. No, I wish I
Okay.
was prepared enough to have
When
read
you
it.
do read it, can you tell me how? I'm always just so curious about novelizations of movies.
So I love them. Like I had a previous incarnation of a I had a previous incarnation of a podcast with Zach and Andrew. It was called Books and Beer, and every week we would do like sword and sorcery, or we would do a specific genre or whatever.
Yeah.
And I chose horror movie novelization tie-ins, and like we did Halloween, we did Friday the 13th, and we did Nightmare on Elm Street, and they absolutely hated them. Like, this is drivel, this is terrible, this is the worst writing. I'm like, yeah, but that's not the point. Like, you get to read the book again, I mean, you get
Yeah.
to read
Read
the
the
movie
movie.
again. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then the way because a lot of the writers who write these novelizations get the script way ahead of time, and so when you're shooting a movie, they'll change the script a lot, but the writer doesn't get that, so they write the movie based on the original script, and
Yeah.
so a lot of shit will have changed from the time that they wrote the movie. I'm sorry, wrote the book to when the movie comes out. So when you're reading the book, you're like, that didn't happen. So you get to see what was supposed to happen. So it's like an
Yeah.
alternate universe of the movie, and I love that sort of shit.
That's fascinating.
And even for like the original Halloween, um, the original novelization for Halloween, they had a whole beginning of the movie a beginning of the movie of the novelization, that they like start in ancient Druid times and how it's a curse that came down through his family. So it's
So do
really
you think
fascinating.
what was the Halloween movie where they add the Druid curse? Was that 5 or 6?
That's 6 with the sign of the Curse of the Thorn. I have the Curse of the Thorn here tattooed on me.
Okay, do you think the writers of The Curse of the Thorn read the Halloween novelization and they were like, this is too good, we're gonna run with this?
Almost certainly, yeah, definitely,
Oh,
because
awesome.
yeah. But it's been rewritten. It's not canon anymore and all that sort of stuff. But it's a different timeline. But I enjoy most of those timelines. I understand that 6 was garbage, but that was the first Halloween movie I saw in theaters, so I have a certain affinity
Okay.
for it. Yeah.
So if you could
Uh,
novelize one horror movie, what would you choose to novelize? Just out of curiosity.
that's actually, oh man, there's a company, I don't want to give them any advertisement because I think the owner is kind of a shithead.
Oh
But there's
no.
there's a company that is doing that where they're after the fact they're writing novelizations of horror movies from like the 80s, which
Yeah.
is my dream idea. I've had that idea for a very long time. I actually reached out to a publishing friend about it and whatever. But they're doing some really good stuff, really cool. I haven't read any of them, but the idea of it, they're doing that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they did this or not, but I would do or Demons. I'm sorry, Demons.
Okay.
Demons is my
The
number one. Yeah.
Lucci Baba, is that his name?
Luca Bava. Yeah.
Luca Baba. Yeah.
Yeah. And because I know that they did one for Vamp, which is a
Yeah.
great movie. So yeah, I think I would do Demons, either that or like Ernest Scared Stupid, something like that.
I want to read both of them.
How about you? What are you choosing?
I've been thinking about this for years. That's why I asked you. I wanted to plug the thing I want to do. Maybe someone's listening.
Okay.
Cue the Winged Serpent, the Larry Cohen movie.
Yes. Okay.
I would love to novelize that. I think the scene where Michael Moriarty goes in to negotiate his fee for turning in the monster is probably my favorite scene in any movie ever.
I have to rewatch it because I watched it with my neighbor Tim, my friend Tim, and our wives were there, and we were just all riffing on the movie. But we were riffing to the point where like I don't even remember the movie, so I need
It's
to
a movie
rewatch
you could infinitely riff on.
it. Yeah,
Absolutely. It is
yeah.
goofy. Like all
But
Larry
that's
Cohen movies.
okay.
I
So
love it.
that's the one you'd want to write.
That's the one I want to write. Absolutely. No question about it.
We're putting that out in the world for you, Ryan.
Putting it
Hope
out in
you
the manifesting. That's the
yeah.
word all the kids use now.
All right, so back to the movie. We fade into a fuzzy POV shot of someone wearing black leather gloves, flipping through a book of photos. Again, black leather gloves is a staple of giallo movies. The hands flip to a page of an older woman, and it stops and it cuts the photo out of the book with a pair of scary-looking scissors, kind of reminiscent of the scissors from Us. And then the hands grab the page and flip the book closed. And we see for a second the cover of the book. And it's the same image that we started off with. The Eyes of Laura Mars is the title. So the person walks, the POV walks to another room. And we see the woman who was just cut out of the book. She's wearing a very expensive looking fur coat. And she's sitting at her desk. The woman then removes her coat and shoes and walks out of the room. The figure follows her into the kitchen unseen by her. Of course, this feels like Halloween. It feels like Michael Myers, right? And instantly, first time I was seeing it, I was like, "Fuck yes, this is awesome." So then we then see as the figure advances on the woman, who turns around startled, and then we see the gloved hand as it's raised above her head, and it's holding. It looks like an ice pick. That's all I can
Yeah.
call it. Is an ice pick, right? And then it comes down on a glass image of the cover of the book, The Eyes of Laura Mars, and the glass breaks. So the image fades out and an actual pair of eyes fades in, and it's a woman, Faye Dunaway, playing the titular Laura Mars. She's startled and she wakes up. She turns on the light and reaches for the phone and dials a number. When she gets no answer on the other end, she hangs up. And this room looks so cool, and right away you can tell she is rich.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely.
There are wall-to-wall, floor-length mirrors on either side of the bed, and some very minimalist design. Read like expensive, right?
Yeah.
I think that this style has gone out and come in multiple times already throughout the decades, but I think now,
Sure.
I think it's back in. You know, perhaps not the carpeting. Maybe it would be wood, like wood floors or whatever. But it looks
Yeah.
great. I would love to have this bedroom. Okay. So the woman seems to be distraught about her nightmare. So she gets out of bed and she walks to her living room, where we hear in the background as an ambulance approaches. And for a second, you think it's going to go to her building. That's how close it sounds. But then it goes farther away. Then she walks to her study and looks for something. Then she grabs for a book hidden under a slew of photos. And it's the book, Eyes of Laura Mars. She flips through the book and we see the same images that the killer saw, eventually landing on the image that the killer cut from the book.
Yeah.
All around her are photos hanging on her wall, strewn about on her desk. And then the camera pans from her right to her left to reveal that as she's been looking up to the book, she's also holding an identical set of scissors as she just saw in her dream. or was it a dream? I feel like they're trying very early on because this is a whodunit, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like very early on they're trying to make us believe that she could possibly be the killer. Very early on we find out that can't be true, but at this point I feel like they're still trying to
Trying to
set
play
that
with us
bait.
a little.
Yeah. What's that device called? Is it a red herring? Right. It's
Red
a red
herring,
herring.
yeah.
Frightened, Laura makes a call again. This time we see the call is to the apartment where we just saw the woman murdered, but there's no answer. Then smash cut to the outside of a building as Laura is arriving at the event in a limo. Her driver, played by Brad Dourif, wishes her luck. And
Yeah.
I think he's funny because like sometimes he's wearing a suit with a driver's hat. Sometimes he's like in a Canadian tuxedo, right?
Yeah.
With jeans laid out with just a hat and his hair poking out of it. But I think this time he's actually wearing a tuxedo because it's a
He's doing like the full with the hat and everything. Because it's for the premiere. He's got
yeah,
to dress up for the premiere to look like the part.
yeah, and he looks great. I mean, yeah,
I
this
think
is the
he's
best
also.
I've seen Brad Dourif looking.
It's also, I think, like later on they try to tease he's the killer, but this scene absolutely demolishes that. He's too sweet. Like he's hugging her, he's saying like, "Oh, it's gonna go great." He's
Yeah,
so happy for her and so enthused about it. There's no way he's the one killing anybody later. He's too sweet. He's too nice about it.
yeah, I feel like they tried to make him a crazy person towards the end, and it's like that was too abrupt of a turn because at first he's a sweet person and then he's a criminal, but you could still understand him being a sweet person because he's just being very thankful and appreciative for the job that he has, right?
Yeah,
But then to go from sweet to criminal to insane, it doesn't work for me, right?
it seems like there's some steps missing. Like if he was the main character, I could see him being driven crazy, especially because I think he had a crush on one of the models later on.
Right,
So
yeah,
I could see like her death driving him crazy if they developed their relationship more.
right,
But I don't think like we ever get. But I think it's very much like the product of 10 writers thing. Like I think some other movies will have one specific bad movie, Jurassic World. Sorry if y'all liked it.
never
There's
seen it.
one rich guy who is in 4 scenes. He's like the owner of the park, and he is a completely different person in each scene. And I felt very much that way about Brad Dourif in this movie. He plays 3 different characters with the same name because of the 10 writers.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with Brad Dourif's acting ability because he hacks the fuck out of the scene,
He does. He's great.
but it is the unevenness of the character that was written that way. I agree. So, but he does wish her luck, and then she's met by her manager again, played by Renee Auberjonois. He greets her at the bottom of the steps, and the steps are lined with paparazzi and onlookers, all calling her name. Suddenly, she's approached by a female reporter who asks her some very rude questions about her work. My favorite being, as you said earlier, if she knows how offensive her work is to women. And like this whole scene, everybody is so aggressive towards her and so rude towards her. And you're like, even the people that are there to buy, and maybe they're not even there to buy, maybe they're just there to party, take advantage of
Yeah.
hangers on sort of thing. But even they're like, they don't fully understand her work, which is, I kind of find, uh, sad for her because she's a very sweet person. Like she's a very nice
Yeah.
person. And that's what I always find with people in the horror community. Like, who is it? Are you familiar with Junji Ito?
Oh yeah, I love Junji Ito.
Yeah. So like Junji Ito, by the stuff that he writes, you would think it would be a horrible person, but he's actually one of the sweetest persons you'll ever meet, or not meet, but you'll ever see interviewed. He's always laughing and talking about how much he's loving his life. And then you have somebody like is it Miyazaki who did
Yeah,
yeah
Hayao Miyazaki.
Miyazaki, yeah, who did all those like Studio Ghibli movies,
Yeah.
and like those movies are sweet and wonderful and caring. Everybody loves those, but he himself is like a very like dark person, and his
Have you seen
personality is very dark.
Have you seen the it's like an interview or like a backstage segment where like his workers bring in like a robot that can do animation and they show it to him. They're all like anticipating his like joyous reaction and he just fucking reams them all out for like 20 minutes about how like there's no soul if a robot does it.
Oh shit! No, I didn't know. I
Yeah,
didn't see that one.
yeah. I mean, I kind of agree with his point. I think he could have been nicer to the people he was screaming at.
Yeah. So I see all that to say that like she is not her work, right? Like she
Yeah,
is. And we talk about a little bit later about what she's trying to represent with her work, but these people are very rude to her, and I just didn't appreciate that. And I felt sorry for the character, but
yeah. And I think during that whole scene, I very much felt like nothing has changed in the last 40, was it 47 years?
mhm.
Or however many years it's been since that movie was filmed. Like, I feel like very much like being a horror writer now, it's like sometimes the same question. Are you endorsing violence? Like, no. And I don't know how political we can get on here, but like
Go ahead, say that
Republicans are
again.
trying to like say Matthew McConaughey can't have an opinion on gun violence because he played characters who shot people. And so it's like it's very much like has not changed. What you portray in your art, people think is like what you want or what you believe, or maybe they're just saying maybe they know it's not. It's just like a cynical attempt to discredit.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. That's all they try to do. They try to discredit, and then the worst thing that they're doing, they say that you're doing, you know?
yeah, yeah. But this scene felt like, and I really enjoyed this scene because it felt like very true to life to me. It felt
Yeah.
like it was really capturing still like I don't know the current move against horror movies on social media, the current move to ban books. So
Oh,
it felt like this is as relevant now as it was then.
yeah, agree. I agree. Um, so then her manager comes and shoos the reporter away. And inside the gala, we see a bunch of very artsy photos of scantily clad women in various poses. This isn't pornography though; it's high end art. And Laura is mobbed by more reporters inside the gala, and they all press her about her subject matter, which is violence in women. And she's defending herself. And they say, "Do you consider?" Or that same interviewer or reporter says, "Do you consider yourself a serious artist?" And she says, first of all, she's taken aback by the question, but she's very poised, and she says, "You know what? I'm very serious about my work." And then the reporter again says, "Well, serious by what standard?" And then it's like she says, "By my own standard." And it's like, "Fuck you, lady. Like, what's your problem?" Like,
Yeah,
you asked her the question, and then when she responds, you're like, "Well, that's not good enough." Like, um, you shouldn't be holding yourself. Oh, what does she say? Like, isn't that very egotistical to say like by
elitist,
yeah, elitist, right? It's like,
elitist. Yeah.
yeah, she was just like looking to get her caught up in anything, you know?
Oh yeah, that was a very. I've done a bunch of interviews for my time at Wicked Horror, and like that's not how you ask questions. That's not how you treat other human beings. Honestly, even
Right?
if you
It's like,
disagree with them or don't like their stuff, like that's not how you treat other people.
I mean, it's like gotcha journalism, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, So then she leaves the reporters and walks into the show. A round of applause from everyone. She's greeted by an older woman who says her photos are selling through the roof tonight. We then hear commentary about whether or not photos like these that depict violence against women are sellable art or saleable art. While walking, Laura asks if they have seen Doris Spencer yet, to which she is told no. Doris Spencer is the woman who we saw get killed at the beginning of the movie. So one of the models standing in front of her photo says what she thinks Laura is saying with her photos is, "Okay, America, okay, world, you're violent. You are pushing murder on us. So here it comes right back at you. And we'll use murder to sell deodorant so that you'll just get bored with murder, right?" So that was really, and you mentioned this earlier, like that was
yeah,
really a poignant commentary on society. I thought it was really great.
yeah, absolutely. This is the part of the movie I really like. I think this is my favorite scene. I think the using deodorant, using murder to sell deodorant is a hysterical line, and
Yeah.
I think it really captures something about. Again, nothing has changed except now when I pump my gas, Maria Menounos is there to advertise something to me. That's
Well,
what's changed is I
also,
can't even do it without pumping my gas, without being advertised to.
yeah, and trigger warning here for school shootings. as you know, like within the last month, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, we had the horrible shooting in Texas, and we both live in Texas,
Yeah.
in Uvalde, Texas, and nothing has changed since then, and I'm cynical, and I don't think anything will come of it, unfortunately. But now the private sector is taking it into their own hands, and now they're making bulletproof backpacks for kids for school shooting scenarios, and then they're advertising those things. So this is exactly what they're talking about, what Carpenter was talking about in 1978, and it hasn't changed. You're using murder to advertise backpacks. Like I understand. Unfortunately, possibly it's a necessary evil to have bulletproof backpacks right now. Like, it's terrible to think about, and it should be handled a different way, with gun reform and all that. But it's not
Yes.
going to happen. So this is their other choice that parents can do to save their to help protect their children. And it's like, it's right there. It's all in this movie. I mean, and if it had continued along with that, I think it would have been a great movie. But like you said, due to the writers and the unevenness of the plot,
Yeah.
of the script, it falls to the wayside. Another
They
red
kind of
herring.
just drop all the social commentary. I think you see it a lot with rewrites. Though. I think the new Saw movie kind of had that too. The Book of Saw. I don't know if you
Spiral.
saw that one.
I haven't seen it. No.
Oh, okay.
Well,
I won't
no,
spoil it for you.
I don't care. I probably won't. I'm not a big
What
Saw
starts
fan.
out is like a movie
I
about
should
racial
say,
violence. Sorry.
sorry to interrupt you. I should say, spoiler alert for Spiral Book of Saw. So go ahead.
Well, I won't even. It's just like the opening
Okay.
maybe 30 to 45 minutes is like it is a movie clearly about police corruption. The what's it called, the cone of silence, where you won't report on fellow officers, and racial violence against the police. By the end of the movie, they just kind of drop all that, and it's just a regular horror movie with nothing in it whatsoever. I
Okay.
felt very much about this movie like I feel about that movie, where it starts out like that, and I'm sure there was some studio executive on both of these that just like did not want the smoke that would bring. They didn't want all the anger that people would have toward it if it continued through with what it was doing. If it really went through to its logical conclusion, because really, if this went through to Laura Mars went through its logical conclusion, we'd have a movie about violence against women in its portrayals and in its actuality.
Yeah.
And we don't really get that at all. We kind of just drop the portrayals, and the photo shoots look really fun. But
And then you still get the violence against women, but it's not talked about in any way other than
yeah, it's not examined at all. It's just
yeah,
unexamined violence.
yeah. So that's what I liked about the new Candyman that came out last year.
Yeah.
Is like they talk the talk and then they walk the walk at the end there.
Yes.
No spoilers or whatever, but they talked about racial injustice and then they went through with it, which is great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The room is packed, and then we hear a conversation between Laura's manager and a detective. Donald is the manager's name, asks the detective for an hour before they do anything. The detective gives him half an hour, saying they want to question some people. About what, we do not yet know. So then there's some great 70s disco music playing in the background. And then, seeking some alone time, Laura walks away from her group and looks at one of her photos. She then overhears a man say that the photo is tragic, that this is a kind of junk passing for art these days. Laura is intrigued. And I forgot to mention here the beautiful outfit that she's wearing. It's like this black gown that comes all the way to her neck, and she looks great. And she is like 37 years old here. And she's been in like in the movies that she's most known for, she's already done. Like at this point of her career, like she's already done Network, she's already done Bonnie and Clyde, she's already done Chinatown. The only one after that would be like Mommy Dearest. But yeah, so she's looking absolutely great here in this gown. I absolutely love how she looks. And this is, I mentioned it because in Giallo, fashion is a huge part of the movies.
Yeah.
So, and she asks the man, played by a young, old-looking Tommy Lee Jones. I've never seen a young-looking Tommy Lee Jones. He's always looked old. It's like Morgan Freeman,
This is the youngest looking I've seen him, but he still looks like 40 at youngest.
He looks like a middle-aged man with a full family, and possibly a grandchild already. But he's like so young in this movie.
I feel like if we found like Tommy Lee Jones high school photos, he would be like the high school sophomore who buys everybody beer because he doesn't get carded.
Probably, yeah,
I feel like
probably.
that's who Tommy Lee Jones was as a teenager.
And you know what's funny is that he used to be a high school football player, and or possibly even college. I don't remember, but um, there's one scene later on in the movie where we can see the how physical he is. But right now, all I see is a horse neck because his neck is as thick as his head. You know,
Yeah.
and it's funny because we make fun of Zach Chapman because he was a high school football player, and he showed us a picture of him in high school, and he had a horse neck. It's so fucking hilarious. When I was looking at Tommy Lee Jones in this, I just thought, now I know that he was a football player because he had that fucking horse neck. I'm gonna see if I can get Zach to to send us that picture, and I'll
Yeah.
share it because it's
I want
funny.
to see.
So she asks, we don't know his name yet, but she asks this man if he's a critic. He says no, he's not. And then she asks if he asks if she knows the artist. She says she knows her fairly well. He says to point her out because he'd be interested to see what kind of frustrated voyeur this chick really is. What is these people's problem? Like that, the art is pretty tame and it's high fashion. Like it, there's nothing in these photos that she's taken that is offensive to me
Yeah.
anyway. You know, but so he was obviously offended by it, but also now knowing what we know about the ending, him pretending not to know who she was is kind of a good turn on for the movie.
Yeah. So I have two comments. That one is, I think it maybe one of the things that has changed. I think that fashion show or that photography show would not get the same angry responses then or now than it would get then. So I think now it would seem tame to most people. So I
Right.
feel like since then, I don't know if you've heard of like there's the Piss Christ. Do you know what
No.
that is? I had a
No.
student write a paper on it once. It's this artist put a Jesus statue in like a jar or something and peed on it until it was a full jar of pee and sold it as the Piss Christ. And it became this like minor national controversy because this guy made that art through a National Endowment for the Arts fellowship, or the
Okay.
National Endowment for the Arts gave him money. So the argument from Republicans was that the state had sponsored this anti-Christian art because they'd given the guy money. But I feel like that's the kind of stuff that gets controversies in like I guess that was like late '90s, early 2000s.
Okay.
But I feel like compared to that, this is pretty tame show.
Right. I mean, also separation of church and state, right? Like what?
Absolutely, yeah,
But yeah, I hadn't heard about that. That sounds awesome. I had to take a look. I had to research that. But also, this is 1978, and I have just done my 70s confessional with Anthony, and we kicked off the 70s with Multiple Maniacs by John Waters. And if there's something for everybody to be offended in that movie, like John Waters himself is the king of trash, right? Like that it's a trashy movie, but it's a great movie. And so, like in comparison, even to the Piss Christ, I think probably like, is it called the Piss Christ?
I think it's called the Piss Christ.
Okay, the Piss Christ would go very well in a John Waters movie, like a John Waters movie from the '60s and '70s. Anyway,
Yeah,
now he's a little less so, but yeah, yeah, I just don't see what there is to be offended by. But obviously, people will be offended. So just then, her manager takes her away and informs her why the police are there. Doris Spencer has been murdered, the woman we saw in her dream. Donald says something about her eyes, which worries Laura, as that is exactly the dream she had. We then see John Neville, old Tommy Lee Jones himself, walk up on a stage and peer out over the crowd, looking rather menacing. So later at home, Laura watches the evening news as they discuss the gala and the murder, and we find out it was the editor of her soon to be released book, Eyes of Laura Mars. She was the one who was murdered. The news says after word of the murder hit the crowd, the sales went up. She receives a call from Elaine, a friend and business associate. Laura asks her if she believes in psychic phenomena, but she says she only believes in a good night's rest. Sitting next to Elaine is Raul fucking Julia playing Michael Riesler, looking like
yeah.
the young Gomez Adams we love. Elaine hangs up the phone, and Michael, watching news coverage, says she still looks beautiful, and that's the problem. For some reason, this angers Elaine, who attempts to leave the couch, but Michael grabs her and forces himself on her, kissing her until she kisses back. So this is that problematic 70s bullshit
Yeah.
that Anthony J.
Yeah.
says he hates the 70s for, because he assaults her. Would this be called considered sexual assault? I don't know the
I
definition, like word for
yeah,
word.
I don't know exactly where you put it. This is definitely not good behavior. I feel
Right.
like there's a line between harassment and assault, but I don't know where to draw it specifically for this instant. Like it's
Yeah.
definitely on that side of things.
Right. So the scene ends there. Next, we're in a dressing room filled with half naked women getting ready for a photo shoot, and more disco music is playing in the background. It's a kind of a party. Laura arrives and gives the hairdressers and makeup artists direction on how she wants models looking. Next, we're out in the streets of New York as Laura gets ready for her shoot. It's a really great set piece of like a car accident.
Yeah.
One car has completely driven up on the hood of another car. I thought this was really great. Like just I can't think of the word I'm trying to say. Like the set design looks great for
Yeah.
this movie, you know.
Absolutely.
And
I
they're
think
in the middle of the New York in like this traffic circle. I think it's called like Columbus Circle or something like that.
yeah,
Which I've never been to New York, so I don't know if it's I'm sure it's a famous circle or something
it's a
like that.
famous kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So then we
I
get a montage of.
think
Oh,
what's
sorry.
fascinating. Sorry. I think what's fascinating about that scene is just the crowd looking on. So I think if the question of the movie is like, when are we voyeurs and when are we actually complicit in violence, the people watching are an interesting note to check on that. You know, people watching the photos being taken. I think the movie kind of drops that whole thing pretty soon after this, but
Yeah,
I
that's a
think
good point.
while that's building, those people watching is just very interesting.
Well, also later in this scene as well, or not the scene. I'm sorry, the next scene afterwards when somebody dies and Laura is approaching the apartment, a whole crowd gathers. Right, so that's again
Yeah,
part of the connection.
absolutely.
So we'll get there, but Um, we then get a great montage of the photo shoot, the car being flipped over, the fountain being turned on, the car is being set on fire. The models are kind of play fighting, except one of them is pulling the hairs too much. And the other model's like, you don't have to pull it that hard, that sort of thing. And they're all dressed in lingerie and fur coats. Um, so we get to see Laura in her element, getting down low, almost laying on the ground, snapping picture after picture, roll after roll. Like she seems to be a woman possessed, right?
Yeah, it really convinced me, you know, that like she's the real deal. I think it was the point of the scene is to convince us that like she's the real deal in her world, her industry.
Right. And as she said to the reporter earlier, she is serious about her craft. And we see
Yeah,
that she is, you know.
yeah,
So suddenly Laura can no longer see what's in front of her. Instead, she sees the point of view of someone walking, just like the other night in her dream. She then sees Elaine walking up the stairs to her apartment. She has to pause the photo shoot for a couple minutes because she is so affected by these visions. But eventually they're able to go back to work. Later, she's in a taxi on the way to visit Elaine when they are stuck in traffic, and she decides to walk the rest of the way.
I do
That
think
was a funny scene. Sorry, go ahead.
one of my favorite parts of the of this movie and throughout the script is just how New York, all of the like that taxi driver doesn't show up again, but he gets like his moment in the sun to shine where he's just like, "Whoa, I'm just gonna sit here all day, lady."
That's exactly what I was gonna say. He's like a fun New York character, you know.
Yeah, yeah, I like that a lot. I like that. I grew up in like the Connecticut, New York area,
Okay,
so I feel like I relate to people who say things like that.
nice. So while she's in the middle of the crosswalk, she's struck by a vision of Elaine walking out of her apartment down the stairs, and she's attacked with the ice pick again in the eyes and thrown down the stairs. Laura runs the rest of the way, but she's too late. Police have arrived, and a crowd is around the crime scene. Like we're saying,
Yeah,
that voyeuristic sense, you know?
I think one of the there's two things I want to say about the vision. I think the scene where she stops in the crosswalk, she's having the vision, is fascinating. It's like a really good piece of writing because the visions put her in danger too. And I think there's got to be that sense of danger. It gives a really good sense of danger. I like that a lot. But on the flip side, I wish there was a delay on her visions because it feels like she can't actually intervene in a way that would help because the visions are so quick, you know?
So it'd be more of a premonition.
Yeah, because it feels like it's not quite. I mean, maybe it's a premonition by a couple of seconds, but it's just like she's seeing it as it happens and she's powerless to it.
Yeah, this is more you're hoping for a broadcast delay, whereas this is more like CCTV. Right?
Yeah, because I think with a broadcast delay, she has the opportunity to intervene in some way.
Yeah,
With just the CCTV, it's like, well, can't do anything about that. I guess we'll just watch your friend die.
yeah. I think that's more horrific to me. Well, I guess I don't know. Like
That's fair, I
having
guess.
the
Yeah,
opportunity to do something, but every time you get there, it's too late, as opposed to not having any opportunity whatsoever. It's like I think they're both, could be equally as terrifying, right?
that's true. I guess there'd be more suspense to the thing I'm suggesting, but here there's more outright horror, dread, terror, whatever you
Yeah,
want to call it.
and this definitely feels a bit Hitchcockian, like with Rear Window, kind of like
Yeah,
a different version of Rear Window here. So I really enjoy that. And Carpenter was always a huge fan of Hitchcock.
yeah.
So then she sees her friend Elaine dead at the bottom of the steps, and the police attempt to shoo her off, but she says that she saw it. And what she means is she saw the vision, but what the police officers believe is she was actually a witness. So they now question her and they ask her what the killer looked like. And she says, well, she was blocks away. So she didn't actually see the killer, but she saw it happen. And they're like, lady, what are you? I love how annoyed this police officer
Yeah,
is at her. So she's like, did you see it or did you not?
very New York.
And then, she says she was blocks away when it happened, but she did see it. She attempts to leave, but they hold her for questioning.
So I read a really interesting essay about the movie from Chad Collins on Manor Vellum, and his argument is that the movie is a very good movie because it captures the way men don't listen to women when they report a violent crime. I don't necessarily agree with his take, but I thought it was a very interesting take. I think it's the best take about this particular scene.
Right. Because nobody takes her seriously,
Yeah,
even in the next coming scene. Yeah, that's a good point. So at the precinct, we see all the models and hairstylists and makeup artists and even her manager have been brought in for questioning. And again, we see her driver, Tommy. Um, and somebody told me, so I'm not the biggest Child's Play or Chucky franchise fan. Like I just recently saw the first four, and I still have to watch the last couple. But like I love part two, and Bride of Chucky's fun. Um, and I think three where he's in the military academy, that one's fun as well. But anyway, so I don't automatically connect Dourif's voice to Chucky. So I
yeah,
saw the movie and I knew it was Brad Dourif, but I just heard him talking as a regular person. Then I saw a review for it on YouTube, the one that we talked about earlier, where he was like, "Yo, I can't see this movie without thinking about Chucky in all these scenes." And I was like, "Oh fuck, that's right." So then I went watched it again for my script, and every time he talked, I just pictured Chucky talking, and it was fucking hilarious.
Did this come out pre or post Chucky?
This is
This
pre.
was pre,
This is
yeah, 'cause this is 78.
78, and Chucky was like 89 or something like that.
Oh, was it that late? Yeah, I mean, you know better than I do.
So this was Child's Play was 10 years later after this movie. So yeah, I just thought that was funny. Like I saw this movie again with that in mind, and
Yeah,
it brought a smile to my, it made me smile. So Tommy's being questioned. Sorry, he's being called in for questioning. So in the room with Laura, in walks Detective John Neville, the man she met at the art opening, and she's so surprised to see him there. He asks if the statement she gave is accurate, and he's kind of laughing at it. But she asks him what he was doing at her opening, to which he says, "Just getting to know you." So then he laughs at the statement that she gave them, but she gets up to leave since she's not under arrest. In the other room, Tommy, is being questioned about the knife that he carries and why he carries it. and also his arrest record. Back in her interrogation room, Laura says, "Look, what I'm trying to do is give an account of the times I'm living, and I've seen all kinds of murder, physical, yes, but moral, spiritual murder. I can't stop it, but I can show it. I can make people look at it." And I think that's a great summation of her art.
Yeah, I think it's a great summation of horror in general. Like we
Yeah,
can't
agreed.
stop awful things, but they're happening, so we can at least portray it in some way.
Portray it and also kind of control it as well, because
Yeah.
you know, I myself, I have a really difficult time reading the news and reading all the horrible things that are
Oh yeah.
happening with gun violence and the pandemic and wars. It really drags me down. But I could turn around and watch 20 hours of horror movies and be a pig in shit. I'm so fucking happy because that's my
Yeah.
release. Like, I cannot control the outside world, but I can control what I'm putting in front of my eyes and
Hmm.
like release all that anxiety and stress and depression through these movies. And so I think you're 100% correct. It's a really great summation of horror movies and why people watch them and why people make them.
Yeah.
Do you think that's why you have found yourself kind of floating more towards horror, or why do you think you had that turn from the this more serious
Literary.
yeah, from the literary to the more horror based?
I think it's what I always wanted to do, really. I think when I decided I wanted to be a writer when I was like 18, I wanted to write horror, and I was forced to write other stuff because that's really, if you go to the majority of creative writing programs in the US, my understanding, and maybe it's gotten better since I did it in 2008, but it's very much like, don't bring your genre crap in here. We're going to do serious literary work, and that's the attitude.
Hmm.
And I do think like all the professors I had were great. And one of them actually at one point laid it out like, look, like I don't have anything against genre fiction, but like I've been writing literary fiction for 40 years. I'm a literary fiction expert. This is what I can teach you to do. This is like my abilities. And I kind of buy that argument more than I buy like the that stuff is crap argument because the stuff isn't crap. I mean, we're still talking about Dracula. Tell me a fucking literary novel from 1897 we're still talking about.
Exactly. I love that. Like the good stuff will always be remembered, and a lot of times the
Yeah,
good stuff is horror. You know,
I think
and I,
low art frequently is just reproduced, and I don't even like the terms low art and high art, but I think like low art is what actually connects with people and keeps going and lives on very often.
yeah, yeah, I agree. And that's like people who say like uh, high level horror. That's like people say elevated horror. It's like it's all horror, you know.
Yeah, I kind of always I like the movies they call elevated horror. I hate the term because I feel like
Right.
when you say elevated horror, you're saying fuck the rest of the low shit horror. Like I don't agree with that. Like I like The Witch, I like Ari Aster stuff, but I also
Yeah.
like Don't Breathe. I like the other lowball shit that comes out. I like it. Deathgasm from New Zealand from a couple years ago.
That's it.
That movie is fun as hell.
Or all like the 80s cheese. And like, yeah, it's like
Yeah.
basically elevated horror is a way for somebody who doesn't like horror to say, I like this movie, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's very. I don't like it. I don't like throwing the rest of the horror away. I don't like it at all.
Yeah. So Neville is unimpressed. He shows her the copy of Laura Mars with the damage to the eyes as we saw in her nightmare. Um, Meanwhile, Donald, the manager, is being interviewed, and a man walks in demanding to speak to his girlfriend, and they kick him out. But Donald says, "If you're looking for suspects, start with him." And I say, ladies and gentlemen, we have a whodunit because
Yeah.
they now they're starting to throw out all the suspects and all that, and
Did you
I'm starting to enjoy it.
did you catch the line? It's probably my favorite line in the movie. I think that guy says like, "Do you know who my father is?" And the detective says, "And my father can whip your father's ass." I just fucking love that line. I thought
Well,
that was real funny.
that's a great line, and that detective is really funny because the manager Donald goes up to him. He's like, "This is ridiculous. I need to see Laura. Uh, my name is Donald such and such." And he's like, "Okay, what was your name again, Donald? Sit down and act right," or something like that. You know, he's like,
Yeah.
we're not dealing
I
with your shit today."
I love that. I think the Tommy Lee Jones scene, though, I feel like was a missed opportunity. Because I feel like if you want to set up real horror versus photographed horror, that was the scene where you could have really done it. So she comes in and she says, I show it as it is, but she's talking to a homicide detective. So, like, if anybody knows what murder is really like, it's him, right?
Right.
And I feel like I feel like the point where the movie just really drops the ball.
That's a great point. They could have taken the opportunity to be like, yo, you think you've seen it? Here's the real shit.
Yeah, exactly.
And he kind of does something like that, possibly in this scene, I don't remember, where he kind of compares photos to her photos and all that sort of stuff. And then he takes her back to the scene of the crime where she can get firsthand like what it feels like to walk over the chalk outline of someone's
Yeah,
body, So that's a great point. That would have added a lot of like, I don't know, depth to his character, like, where he's thinking
yeah,
about it, because like, as we find out, he has more reverence for death than he believes
that she has.
she does. Right. And so that would
Yeah.
have been like, yeah, that would have been great. It's almost like you're a writer. So then the detective was amused by Donald's statement and he asks for some of that Rona Barrett. And I didn't know who she was. Did you know who Rona Barrett was?
I did not.
So I had to look it up. She was a gossip columnist in the 60s and 70s, and she became a host for Good Morning America, and then later the Today Show, and then after that, Entertainment Tonight. And she retired and started the Rona Barrett Foundation, an advocacy group for underserved senior citizens. So she was like the Ann Landers, or just like a gossip columnist, which is funny because like literally nobody would know who she was now. And so
Yeah.
that's how a way to date yourself, right? Is with references to current times. So back with Laura, Detective Neville shows her unpublished crime scene photographs and compares them to pictures that Laura took. And he wants to know why they're so similar. And she says that 2 years ago, she started to see images of violence and would use those for her photos. Neville seems unconvinced, and she says, you think I was there at the murder scenes, killed those people, then recreated the scenes in my photographs? Again, they're still trying to make her seem like she could be the killer.
Yeah.
So next, Neville takes her back to Elaine's apartment where he asks her if she recognizes any of the men's suits in the closet. So she walks over and she starts looking at them and she says, yeah, they're her husband's or her ex-husband, Michael Riesler. He asks if this was happening when they were married, and she says no, and she doesn't know where he is. He walks her out and hands her his card.
So it's
And
a
throughout this, sorry, go ahead.
it's a very weird moment with the suits. It kind of like raises some questions, right? Like, does he know they're Michael's suits, and that's why he asks her? Because he can't be just bringing every person in there. And then if he knows it's Michael's suits, what's his motive here? What is he? Actually, I know he's got the split personality at the end. Sorry, that's a little bit of a spoiler.
So,
But like, which personality is doing this? Because it just seems like he's trying to hurt her. Like, what part of your investigation needs you to bring a woman to see her ex-husband's clothes in her friend's closet? Unless she's the suspect.
right. And maybe you had that point there. Maybe it's the other part of him that does want to hurt, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I hadn't thought about that. But I had thought, like, how does he know that it's his, that it, like you're saying, her ex-husband's clothes? But then I remembered that there's that other half who has been following her, and so
Yeah.
he would know about her, But in the movie, it doesn't make sense, right? Like at this particular time, it doesn't make sense. So throughout this whole exchange, they swap meaningful glances at each other. And then on her way out, she asks if she needs a bodyguard. And he says, no, she already has one. And my question to you is, what do you think this means? Is he saying he's her bodyguard or that the killer is her bodyguard? Because it felt more like an accusation more than a statement.
So I didn't pick up on the eyes in that scene.
Okay.
The smoldering eyes between them.
Googly
I
eyes.
missed that. So I thought, like, when I first saw this scene, I'm not always the best at picking that stuff up. I thought she was saying because Tommy Brad Dourif's character had the switchblade, he was kind of her bodyguard. And I was like, wait a second, no, he means himself, maybe. I'm not
Uh,
sure. I
yeah,
think this is the moment where the movie starts like turning, like they start flirting instead of being like, I don't know. Maybe it's not even the best if like a movie's didactic and they're both kind of champions of like, this is what real murder is, this is what emotional murder is.
yeah.
But I feel like this is where they kind of flip to be people in love.
Yeah, they're definitely like, okay, now we're a quarter of the way or we're a third away of the movie. We've established the storyline. We've established, some scares. Now we need to get on with that love making, baby. So
Yeah,
they just like slotted it in here. So it definitely feels like that to me.
for sure.
Uh, so then Laura arrives home and is assaulted by a shadowy figure, and she attempts to scream, but her mouth is covered by a hand. But she's able to let out the name Michael over and over. And I'm thinking, Halloween, John Carpenter can't get away from Killer Michaels. But we see it's just her ex husband. And I feel like if he had just sat on the couch and let her see him, it would have been less noise than what just happened.
Absolutely. I think he may have been in hiding because he was worried someone would come in with her.
Uh huh.
Um,
Oh,
so,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so Roger Ebert hated this movie. And I like Roger Ebert a lot. Even he hates slashers though. So
Yes.
anytime you're going to review of a slasher, you're not going to get a very good review. He
Yeah,
writes about other movies beautifully. He really likes supernatural horror, actually.
well, he's famously hated Halloween and shat on it. And then when it became this legend, this cult classic, and you know, famous horror movie, he went back and reviewed it and was a lot nicer to it. So
Yeah.
and he's done that a couple times. So I have a little bit of a thing with Roger Ebert, but I went from Chicago and I used to watch his show all the time. So
Oh
it's like,
yeah.
so it's there. But yeah, anyway,
So
what did he say about this
one
movie?
of his critiques of the film was that instead of jump scares that were like meaningful, you got like her friends jumping out at her from the dark. And this is definitely one of those scenes where it's just like her harmless, kind of doofy ex-husband. Although I think we're supposed to think of him as a suspect.
Oh yeah, yeah, he's definitely a suspect. But I don't know where Harmless is because he has in this scene he assaults her and he's already assaulted another woman. So it's like,
Yeah, I think when I
uh,
said harmless, I mean he's not murdering people. He is
gotcha.
not harmless. He does cause harm. Absolutely causes harm. I
No, no, no.
misspoke
I
there.
got you, Ryan. I got you. You said it.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean it like that.
I got your journalism.
He's a rapey asshole. That's what I mean.
So she asked how he got in, and he still has a set of keys. And she tries to swipe him away from him, but he puts it back in his pocket. So he says he did not kill Elaine. She was the best meal ticket he ever had. But Laura chimes in and says she was the best meal ticket he had ever had. So he explains that he met Elaine in San Francisco and she told him she'd be good for him. She'd let him write and she'd take care of him. But he always loved her, Laura, and that he was eventually going to return back to her. He again assaults a woman, trying to kiss Laura, who pushes them away. And she's crying and she says, "What good friends?" And he says a great fucking line here. I mean, it's a terrible line and he's a terrible person, but he
Oh
says,
yeah,
"I was your husband. I was never your friend." And
absolute terrible
the,
person. But yeah, very well
great,
written line.
yeah, and the way Raul Julia plays it, it's like, oh man, like he's charming yet like fucking creepy. Like, yeah, just great. He does a great job in this scene.
Yeah, I do feel like this was originally set up to be like another voice in the portrayals of violence versus actual violence with this writer coming in, but that never shows up at all. It's just he writes nondescript books, maybe, or maybe he just drank for 6 years straight.
Right, right. Because we do find out he's a writer, but we don't know of what or if he's ever been published.
Yeah,
So then Michael insists he did not kill her. All his clothes and money and future prospects were wrapped up in Elaine. Why would he kill her? Now, I just want to say that Raul got this part because he lived in the building where they were shooting, and the director had just seen him in a play. And
Huh.
so he was credited as RJ in the opening credits, but as Raul Julia in the end credits. So I thought that was really funny. Is like he didn't, the coincidence, but the director seeing him in a play and then him also living in the same building where they were shooting. That was kind of cool.
So is this like, did this help launch Raul Julia's career, or is this just like one of his early films?
It was one of his early films. He'd been in a bunch of movies before that, but
Okay.
as secondary or characters,
Yeah.
stuff like that. So, but because he was still definitely a not a screen actor, a play actor. I don't forget what it's called, but
Yeah.
yeah, he was in plays. So, and then he says that she provokes him. She's always provoked him, and she continues to provoke him, basically saying, um, you're the reason I get angry at you, sort of thing. And it's like very like abuser language, you know. Um, he says he knows what sort of killer she can be at 3 a.m., always ignoring him for her dark room, and she counters that he has been a drunk for the last 6 years. Laura, disgusted and fed up, says, "Will $50 be enough to rid me of you?" And then she pours herself a drink, and he just looks at her like insulted, but also like, "Fuck it, I'll take it."
But she gives him the bill. She gives him is 100, correct?
I didn't look at the bill. I know she says 50, but the bill might have been 100.
I think it was 100.
How funny would that be when she's like, do you guys change for 100?
I thought for a second, like if it's a different, like a David Lynch movie, she would have asked for change.
That's true.
I think it wasn't the right kind of movie for her to ask for change. But I think if she had asked, I would have loved it. I'd have been dying.
Yeah. So next we see an argument between Tommy the driver and Donald the manager. Donald steps out of the car to let Laura in. As they drive, they see Laura's advertisements on all the city buses. Tommy tries to talk to Laura to admit about his previous criminal history, but Donald tries to get him to shut up. They argue again, and Laura tells them both to shut up. And Donald is like insulted that he could be like connected with the help, He's like, "Oh, me, the same as your driver? Okay."
Yeah.
So then they arrive at her office, which is at the docks, and there's a beautiful shot of them driving down this industrial corridor, and it looks great. They arrive at her office, and Tommy and Donald go their separate ways, and Laura walks up alone to her office. She opens the windows and is walking around her office when suddenly she gets another vision of the killer, but it's of her in her office, which has got to be trippy, right? You're seeing in your eyes, you're seeing a point of view of the killer behind you.
Yeah.
I thought this was great. I thought this was a great idea.
Absolutely.
So she sees the killer open the door behind her, then she hears the door opening behind her as well. So there is, I guess, a slight delay of it, right? But like seconds. So she then runs out of the room, yelling for Donald the whole way. Uh, the whole way she can see herself being chased, which is really trippy, a
Yeah.
really cool scene.
And she's very coordinated.
Why?
For having no sight, she does not trip once.
That is true, right? It's got to be difficult to like be running through point of view. Though I guess if she like played first person shooter, she'd be excellent at it or something.
I think the Duck Hunt was the only possible first person shooter at the time.
Yeah,
Right?
and it probably wasn't even.
I don't think Duck Hunt was out in '78.
Yeah, no, it was like in the mid '80s.
Yeah.
So then, she makes it to some stairs and then collapses. But just as she's about to be caught, Donald reaches out to her, and she tells him that the killer is up there. Again, I think they're trying to possibly set it up that Donald is a killer because he just happens to show up right there.
Yeah.
I like the red herrings that they're throwing at us. Again, typical of giallos.
So did you, as you were watching, did you buy any of the red herrings?
I'm a very simple person when it comes to like I'm not always trying to decipher who the killer is because for me it kind of takes away for some of the joy of it. So I
Okay.
kind of just let the movie come to me. But if it's something obvious, like in Five Cream, the newest cream, the Scream that came out. Like some of
Yeah.
that shit was like obvious, and so I was like, oh, it's this and this and this, and I was completely wrong. But um, in this movie, I didn't see it. No, actually, I did. Yeah, I did see it, but I thought perhaps she was also like, I think I saw it, but I didn't quite
Okay.
connect. Did you?
I did the same thing I did with, you called it Five Cream.
Five Cream, yeah.
I haven't heard that before. I think it's really funny. I really like it.
I'm gonna
I
give
think I
that
did
to
the same thing with
acting
Five
girl
Cream
next.
in this, where I saw who it was, and I was like, that's too obvious. They wouldn't do that. And spent the rest of the movie double secret probationing myself into thinking it can't be the person who it obviously is.
So it has to be the person you most medium suspect.
Yeah, well, in this movie, I eventually thought it was the detective who first interviewed her. So I knew it was a cop. I just got which cop wrong.
Okay. So, like I said in Giallo, it's all like well, don't want to make any spoilers, so I won't call a specific movie, but um, they'll introduce a character at the very beginning of the movie, and you're like, oh, that's fucking definitely them, and that person will disappear. By the time you get to the end, you will have already thought it was 5 or 6 other people, so you completely forgot about that first person.
Yeah,
And when it turns out to be the first person, you're like, oh yeah, I was right at the beginning,
they told me right at scene one.
and that's kind of like how I was with Neville.
Yeah,
So next we see the police have arrived to the offices. Inside, Donald is trying to talk Laura into not canceling the photo shoot, which she isn't having any part of. But he finally convinces her. Next, we get another photo shoot montage. Disco music, dancing, naked women. Tommy arrives with flowers for the shoot, and Donald tells him not to disappear. So, oh, okay, where's he been disappearing
yeah,
to? You know? She instructs a male model to get into the pool where he will play dead, and he's like, for $100 an hour, I'll do it. you know.
yeah.
And so then they start applying blood to his shirt to look like a gunshot wound. And then she has a flashback to earlier when she was being chased, and she cannot continue the photo shoot, so they cancel the day.
I will say, out of all the photo shoots, this one looked like the most fun. Like it
Really?
just looked like a fun work environment. Not just because there's naked people, but like I feel like if you were one of those people, like everyone seemed like they're having a good time. Everyone seemed to be vibing really well.
Yeah, there wasn't like cat fighting like earlier in the earlier one where people
Yeah,
were pulling each other's hair and all that. I think they were just all vibing on the fact that a man was dead on the ground, which I'm cool with.
yeah, I'm with it.
So later, she's talking to Neville about her psychic visions. Laura says she can show him what she means about her visions. So they go back inside, and she explains that she is seeing the killer's point of view. She says she can't see what's in front of her; she can only see what's being projected through the killer's point of view. She asks him why the killer's doing this and why they're killing her friends. He says that they could be jealous. It could be someone who, in their own loony way, feels your work is promoting porno and decadence, and he has a mission to clean up the world. And it's like, okay, dude, that's awfully specific.
Yeah, yeah,
Like the vein on the side of his neck was starting to pop. It was like, okay, you're telegraphing it a bit too much here.
yeah,
So she says whoever it is was here this afternoon. Again, more lovey looks between the two of them as Neville leaves. Back at the precinct, Neville is interviewing more models, and the other cops are jealous and like knock on the door and try to get in and ask if he needs any help. And he says they're fine. We don't need any help. Get the fuck out of here. And then he asks the models if they've ever been harassed by people for working with Laura. Some that say that they have. Of course, it like comes with the job. But they say that one specifically says that she kept some of the letters, and he asks her to share them with him. Again, this isn't brought up ever again in the movie.
No, do you think if it was brought up again, do you think his alter ego wrote those letters, or you think it was just random creepers?
I think it could be. That's a great idea. I think both. Like I'm sure they got random creepers,
Yeah,
but
I
later
feel
on in the
like
movie, sorry to interrupt you, but real quick, he does say later on in the movie that like he handles everything, like he pays the bills and the evil one like pays the bills and all that sort of stuff. So I
Yeah.
could totally see him writing letters. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, I feel like I've seen just online women talk about like the DMs they get, and I imagine
Mhm.
these models are getting very similar letters to those DMs.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I'm sure even more because now, well, I guess through a letter you can hide behind anonymity, and with social media you can as well. You know.
Well, I think with a letter you have to have the address. I think there might have been less, but I imagine it's the same level of creepiness.
Right, but you can put whatever address you want on there for as a
No,
return
but you have to
address.
have the address to send it to. Like if I think if
Right.
I
Yeah.
tried to look up like a professional model's mailing address today, I would not find it. I don't have
Right.
the skills. If I wanted to look up their Twitter DMs, it wouldn't be particularly difficult. I wouldn't do that 'cause it's fucking creepy and weird. But
You know, I was at a store yesterday, and the store had out right on the counter for everybody to see where you're paying. They had a notebook where people could write down their email address if they wanted to be contacted with specials and all that sort of stuff.
yeah,
And I was just thinking, like, I'm just looking at it right here, and there's like 5 or 6 women's emails addresses right there, you know. And I'm like, I don't know if they know that their email addresses are just out for people to see. And I had like this thought of like, what if a stalker followed a woman in and then saw that she wrote her email down? I don't know. I was like, this seems wrong for some reason to just be out here like in this day and age. And that's
yeah,
kind of going like with what you're talking about, you know?
yeah. People want more privacy. People deserve privacy, honestly.
Yeah.
But it's hard with the internet.
So later at night, we see the security detail at Laura's house. She's in the dark room developing pictures, and then she gets another vision. This time it's of Lulu, one of the models that we just saw. Her and another model are in an apartment, and they're attacked by the gloved killer as Laura tries to phone her to warn her, but unfortunately it's too late, and they're both murdered. So later at their funeral, Neville arrives to question Laura. And this is some of that movie logic here.
Yeah.
These two friends are being buried together, like side by side next to each other, even
Well,
though one of them has a boyfriend, or even maybe there's a family plot somewhere. It's like, why are they being
yeah. Were they a couple? I got couple vibes from their apartment, but I also saw the boyfriend. I thought maybe they're polyamorous, but none of
exact?
this was in text. This is all like you look at their living situation, you're like, that doesn't seem like a friend's apartment. And she's on the massage table naked, and I'm like, I don't massage my friends naked. Like, wait, is
What?
something happening here?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's unclear, but also it's the swinging '70s, So who
Yeah,
knows?
yeah. So whoever
That part, it's just the yeah, the placement of the caskets right next to each other makes no sense to me. But story
unless they're
logic,
a couple, because I feel like a couple would be buried together.
even
Uh,
that though, like who knows how long you're like if let's say I was with my wife before we were married. Let's say we were together 3 years, but we weren't engaged and we weren't married. I don't know if I want to be married. I don't know if I'd want to be buried next to her. I'm sure she's listening, and I'm going to pay for this. But
she's
I
taking
don't
notes,
know.
man. It's her birthday in 2 days.
So I don't know if I'd want to be buried next to her as opposed to like buried with a plot by where my parents are going to be buried. Like I
Yeah,
don't know.
that's a good question. And like, I can't imagine because like I don't have a last will and testament right now. I don't have a will.
Right.
I'm 32, and I feel like I'm probably 10 years older than the models in the movie. I can't imagine
Exactly.
that they have a will. I have lots of questions about who made this decision, why they made this decision.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes it a good detail or a bad detail for this particular film that we're thinking about it this much.
I don't know, but I'd like to use the rest of our time talking about this.
Absolutely. Let's figure it out. Let's call an estate lawyer. Do you have a good one? We can get on
let's pull,
speaker,
let's
dial him
pull up,
in. Her end.
let's pull up the movie and look it up right now. Yeah. So later on at the movie, I'm sorry. Um, Later at their funeral, Neville arrives to question Laura, and it's a beautiful shot as the attendants, the people who attended the funeral, are leaving the mass. We see from inside the church outside this beautiful shot of New York in the fall. It looks surreal. Once the doors are, and then they walk out into like all these trees and foliage and stuff like that. Foliage? I feel like Marge Simpson here. Foliage.
Foliage.
Yeah,
Foliage?
foliage.
Now I'm lost too, man. Lots of leaves.
Yeah. So once the doors are open, they are flooded by photographers and reporters, Laura especially. And then the angry boyfriend from earlier in the movie accosts her and tells him that they all blame her for their deaths. The police quickly remove him, and as he's being removed, he yells, "You're the murderer. You're going to pay for this," over and over. Neville dismisses Tommy and says that Laura will ride with him. So in the car, Laura has been greatly affected by this outburst by the boyfriend, and she's crying. And she asks Neville if they could not go home immediately, and he says sure. And they go. I guess they stay out in the country, and Neville drives her to a forest, and they go for a walk in the country. And again, this is feels very like shoehorning in some romance.
Yeah. I think there's a line in there because in the scene they're talking about they fuck, and then one of them, or before they fuck even, one of them says like they lampshade it. They like say something like, "This is a very inconvenient time to fall in love" or something.
Yeah.
Like they acknowledge how weird it is that we've just like, I don't know, we were on a train, we just shifted to a completely different track. We're going a different direction now.
And they're like, "Hey, if we say it, you can't say it,"
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm very familiar with that. If I make the fat joke, you can't make the fat joke. So I completely understand that. But so she asks him if he thinks that the man was right, that it is all her fault. And Neville admits that what he thought of her before he knew her was wrong. And they again exchange glances, and then Laura kisses him, which is a nice change of pace, although it's still a surprise kiss. And some people don't really like surprise kisses a lot. Kisses should be with consent. So there's that.
Absolutely.
She admits in the midst of all of this that she can't stop thinking of him, and he admits the same thing. He says it's completely unprofessional, but he can't stop it. They then embrace in a kiss, and we fade out of that scene and onto a post-coital scene of them lying in bed having some pillow talk. Afterwards, Neville leaves her a gun, and he teaches her how to use it. He says, "If you have to use it, you'll be doing the son of a bitch a favor." Like, okay. So I wonder,
Foreshadowing.
there's foreshadowing, and I'm wondering if he's down there somewhere trying to, like, we don't know at what point that other half takes over.
Yeah.
So I wonder if he's deep down under there trying to help her.
I will say, I don't think the 10 screenwriters knew either. It feels very much like that ending is just kind of tacked on. I don't think it's not foreshadowed at all that there's two Nevilles.
You're completely correct. Like they started filming without the end scene, and
Oh, okay.
so
Yeah.
they didn't know who was going to be the killer until while they were in production. So later at night, they're at Donald's house for a party, for his birthday party, and she admits to a friend there by the name of Caroline that she's possibly in love. And then she also gifts Donald a very unflattering photo of him, which he seems to love. And then Tommy is asked to come back in an hour, and as he's leaving, Donald says, "We'll save a piece of cake for you." And then Donald
Big
says,
insult.
"Yeah," and Donald says, "You're a piece of cake." And this angers him for some reason, and he slams the door in Tommy's face.
Big
It's like they
insult for
have
78.
they have like this animosity towards each other that's like very childlike, and it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
So then later in the revelry, Michael calls the apartment and asks her to go to him. And this is that 78 shit before you have a cell phone where you're trying to find somebody, you just call all their friends' houses. That's
Yeah.
really weird. Like children these days, these young whippersnappers, they'll never understand the feeling of not being in contact with anybody you want 100% of the time,
Yeah.
So she tells Donald that Michael is drunk and in a laundromat and she's going to see him, and she asks for help to ditch the police. Next, we see her leaving the apartment building and not going to the car but walking instead. The police, who have just been gossiping about Neville and Laura, have to follow her. As they drive off after her, we see Donald leave his apartment and get in his car. The cops follow Laura and stop her, and as she turns around, we see it was Donald the whole time. They're like,
Yeah.
"What the fuck?" So they did the old switcheroo,
I
and they
like
go
this
looking
scene.
for Laura. It's nice, right? It's a cool
I got a little laugh out of it. It was a fun little scene.
it's like something you'd see in a spy drama or something, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so they leave Donald alone, and he walks back to his apartment building, and then Laura, as Donald, has driven off away. We then see Laura in Donald's car driving, and when she starts to get a vision of the killer following Donald. But like you said, there are some repercussions, or not repercussions. I forget what the
She's in jeopardy.
right. She's in jeopardy because of these visions because she
Yeah,
cannot
she's driving
see
a
out of her
car.
eyes. So she's driving and is crashing into cars, into walls, and stuff like that. And then she eventually crashes into like this building that has a wall of glass, and she crashes in there and the car comes to a stop, and then she sees the killer get on the elevator with Donald and eventually kill him. It actually cuts away before he's actually killed, which
Yeah.
there's not a lot of violence or blood in this movie. It's always cut away, you know.
No, I feel like with like 30 seconds of cut, this could be a made for TV movie.
Oh yeah, just basically removing nipples.
Yeah, exactly. Cut the nudity.
Female nipples, right? Male nipples are
Yes.
fine. It's the female nipples.
Weird fucking MPA bullshit. MPAA.
So next, Neville and Laura arrive at her apartment after the hospital, and he admits to being worried about losing her. He asks her to take her medicine like a good girl. Yuck. And she admits to not having any more tears to shed for Donald just because she's all cried out. He says he wants to get her away from here, and then they embrace in a kiss. And then they're cock-blocked by the doorbell.
Yeah, and that whole scene felt like it was written by like a seventh grader. It's a very paint by numbers, not very good, well written scene.
Yeah. It's one of the other detectives who tells Neville that they may have a lead, so he has to go. He asks her if she still has the gun, and she says she does. She keeps it in the bedroom, so then off he goes. Next scene, we see Neville is in an apartment with Laura's pictures plastered on the walls. The cops are ransacking the place. A call comes in asking for Neville, and it's Tommy. He says he wants to talk to him alone. Neville tells the other cops to put an egg in their shoes and beat it, which they do. So Tommy waits for them to leave, then goes up to his apartment. As he's going up the stairs, we see a man in the shadows waiting for him. I really like this, and I don't know if it's bullshit or not, if this would ever happen in real life where there's a suspect and they want him to come in, and he's like, I'll come in if it's just you and me. Like, I feel like I've seen that in movies, but I don't think it'd ever happen in real life. Like, the cop would have to be
Yeah,
real cool about possibly being murdered.
or like real confident in their ability to fight the other guy off. But I don't think that happens in real life. No, I feel like it's like against procedure.
Right. Like, you'd be fired if you did something like that, you know?
Yeah, at least suspend. Yeah, you'd get in trouble for sure.
Right. You wouldn't get fired. You're not get fired if you kill an unarmed black man. You're not going to get fired for that. So, right. They
Yeah,
would get their wrists slapped. So Tommy then enters the apartment and asks if he's going to be arrested now. Neville says no. And then Tommy explains that he was down in the basement killing time, waiting for the party to be over. I feel like Dourif in this scene is doing a bit of, well, like you said, with the different writers. Now, this feels like it's a
yeah,
different Tommy.
yeah.
This feels like an over the top Tommy, you know?
I think this Tommy feels like nitroglycerin. Like he's gonna explode any second. He does not feel like the Tommy from the beginning who gave Faye Dunaway a really nice hug and said, like, I'm so proud of you. I'm so excited this is happening. You're going to do
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Again, Dourif acts the hell out of it, but the way the
Yeah.
character is written, it's uneven. So Tommy explains he was in the basement killing time, waiting for the party to be over. He says he went to take the elevator and found Donald's body. Neville says that they found a card from Tommy's card deck that he always carries around with him underneath Donald's body in the elevator. So he's possibly being set up, right? Because Neville seems to believe that he's not the killer.
but it also seems very obvious. Like, I don't know anyone mentions it in the movie. Like, that dude went on the elevator shuffling that card deck. It's not hard when you're shuffling standing up to drop one card and not notice.
I guess I didn't realize that he was shuffling the card deck. I didn't see that.
He's playing with it when they have that cake exchange.
Right. You're right. Okay. Yeah,
So
that's true.
I don't know. I just
Oh, I okay. Not the killer. You mean what's his name? Who got
Tommy
killed? Tommy was playing it at the cake, playing with it at the cake
during the
exchange.
cake scene, and then he used the elevator right after. So it doesn't seem like it's not like a red glove. You know, it's not like you dropped the murder weapon with your DNA on it or something.
Right. But also at the party, they kept saying that they wanted to play cards. I forget the name of the pinochle or whatever.
Bridge.
Bridge, right. So it's very likely that Donald could have also had some cards on him because they were playing cards at his birthday party.
Yeah.
You know. So but yeah, so it was a again another red herring that they're still using in this one. So Neville grills Tommy about where he was and what he remembers. And Tommy can't remember everything, and then he realizes that Neville thinks he's crazy and is going to put him in the psych ward. One of the other detectives walks in and grabs Tommy, and Neville says, take him into psych or whatever for an evaluation. But Tommy struggles and says no, and then he pulls a knife and throws the detective down on the ground and makes a break for it. And as he's running down the steps, he stabs another pig and runs out of the apartment with Neville close on his heels. Neville makes a hell of a leap over a steel gate.
Yeah.
And this is what we were talking about earlier, where we see the athleticism that Tommy Lee Jones had. He did this in one take.
Oh, really? Was it actually him, not a stunt person?
That was him. Like we see him the whole time.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Good for him.
And then they are in hot pursuit of Tommy. They shoot him in the one detective shoots him in the back as Neville finally reaches him. And Neville yells at the detective that Tommy was sick in the head and that he should not have been shot. The detective states that he saved the taxpayers $20,000. And
Yeah,
again,
that was fucked up.
Very fucked up, and like still the attitude probably of
Oh yeah.
of police.
I feel like this is where I realized this was an ACAB movie.
Yeah.
This is how John Carpenter and 10 of the screenwriters think of cops.
Yeah, because Carpenter is not the biggest fan. I love John Carpenter. I love how he's just a grumpy curmudgeon now who just like smokes weed and makes music with his stepson and friends.
And plays NBA 2K, whatever the current year is, 2K22 probably now.
Yeah. So then Neville calls Laura and tells her it's all over to pack a bag. So then back at Laura's apartment, Neville arrives and Laura is actually packing. She pulls out a drawer and encounters the gun that Neville gave her, but she keeps on packing. Neville enters the building and encounters Laura's ex, Michael, on the elevator. Back in the apartment, Laura has another vision, this time of a hand being stabbed in the elevator, then the killer walking down her hallway. She runs to the door and locks it as this door starts being pounded on, and she yells for him to go away, which suddenly he does, which is scary.
That scene, yeah, but that scene is like straight out of a giallo. I think it was Deep Red has that exact moment with the locked door getting pounded on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it does. It does exactly. When did Deep Red come out? Now, 1975, so 3 years earlier. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's terrifying. The thought of somebody trying to break down your door. It's like the evil you know versus the evil you don't know.
Yeah. That was definitely a moment where I kept yelling, like, I'm not a gun person. I kept yelling, you have a gun. Get the gun. Get the gun. Shoot through the door. Like, damn, save yourself.
Do something, right? But
yeah.
So suddenly we see a shadowed figure outside of her apartment window and smash the windows to get in with like the chair, like a patio chair. At this point, we don't know who the killer is. It could be Tommy Lee Jones or it could be the ex-husband. In fact, at this point, I don't think we really have a reason, besides like picking up on some clues here, but not really. You think it's the ex-husband. So when the window smashed in and in walks Neville, you're like, oh, wait. So that means that we saw him kill the ex-husband, right? Because we saw the knife go into the hand. So that happened.
I had a question about that scene because we don't see somebody die. we see a knife through a hand. So you
Yeah.
think that the ex-husband is 100% dead, not
Yes.
just going to the hand doctor?
No, I think he's dead.
Yeah, that's probably a good conclusion.
Because otherwise he is a complete shithead for not trying to help her, right? Like
But he's been a complete shithead in every way,
that's
basically.
true, right?
I feel like that guy's probably at a bar right after the hand wound. He's trying to get free drinks because he got stabbed through his hand.
Do you think that's what happened? Do you think that he's
No,
now
I think
dead?
he's dead. I think he's dead. I'm just curious.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So then he hugs her and tells her it's over. Tommy is dead. And she's like, what? She doesn't believe him. She's like, why would Tommy do it? And Neville says he hated you. He had an idea that your work was glorifying violence. He had the idea that death shouldn't be used to sell things. Death is a sacred thing. And where have we heard this before? We've heard it from Neville earlier.
Yeah.
So Laura's starting to be creeped out, and she's like, Laura asks him, what are you talking about? And then Neville launches into his villain origin story.
Yeah. He says, I by accident?
Yeah. So he says, one day, Tommy was having a shootout with a cop in a downtown Chicago toy store. No, I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. So Neville says his mother was a sex worker, although he doesn't say sex worker. He says, the old name
Mhm.
for it. Leaving him alone for days at a time in dirty diapers while she went to work in Washington, D.C. One day, Tommy's dad came home, or just a John, it could have been just a John, and slashed her throat, which Tommy, which was actually Neville, saw. He actually says, I saw her bleed out, which Laura catches right away, like you're saying.
Yeah.
Then he says, I don't know what you see in that son of a bitch. He can't even pay his light bill, can't finish schoolwork. I'm the one who pays the bills. But you just said that they cut off the lights because he couldn't pay the bill. So if you're the one paying
Yeah.
the bills, you're not doing too good of a job. Maybe it's purely financial. Maybe they cut it off because didn't have the money for it.
They only cut it off when one of them is active.
Right. So then he says, I'm the one who keeps this body fit. He then says, I'm the one you want. And then they exchange those glances for the last time. Suddenly, Laura is seeing herself through Neville's eyes, and she is terrified. She retreats to her bedroom, but like you said, she can't see anything, so she has to kind of back up as
Yeah.
so as to not fall down. And then we see Neville kick the door open. She sees Neville approach her with the ice pick, and she backs up into the mirror. He grabs her and she yells that she loves him. In the mirror, Neville stabs at his own face, but we think that he's stabbing at Laura, but it's a trick of the mirrors.
Yeah.
And then he breaks the mirror. He turns around and advances on her, and she has grabbed the gun. He says, if you love me, kill me now. Please, kill him. He grabs Laura's hands and pulls the gun into his gut and says, I love you, please, and begs her to kill him. With the strings reaching a crescendo, she finally pulls the trigger, and Neville falls to the floor dead. Later, she calls the police and says, he came here to kill me, but he couldn't do it because he really did love me. The operator asks for her name over and over until she says, I'm Laura Mars. Then that Fire Barbara Streisand song kicks in as
Yeah.
the screen freezes on her face and slowly zooms in to her eyes as it goes from black and white to negative, just like in the beginning, the exact
Yeah.
same image actually, and we've come full circle for the movie. And so then that's the end. That's the end of Eyes of Laura Mars.
So I liked the beginning and the end being like bookended like that. I hated the ending. So I think we kind of hinted at throughout. How did you feel about the ending?
I think scientifically speaking or mental health wise, I don't think it's accurate. I don't think that's how dual personalities work. I think that's how they maybe thought they worked in the 70s, and you would use it for dramatic effect. I mean, this has been used in tons of movies.
Yeah.
This idea has been used before. So I was like, it's kind of a cop out.
Yeah.
It felt like they just tacked on this, which they literally did. They tacked on the ending. It was no, it didn't really resonate with me. How about yourself? What did you think?
it feels like an ending to a different movie. Very much. It doesn't feel like they ever set up for Tommy Lee Jones to have a split personality. I feel like if you watch the whole movie, there's only maybe one scene where the evil personality is out, and that's the very beginning. And the rest of the movie, he seems like a different guy. But I
Yeah,
feel like because of like the loose writing of like other characters, like Brad Dourif's character, also seems to like be different people at different times. So it's very difficult to say like if the writing's not tight all around, like when is he this one, when is he that one? And
yeah,
I've never, like, as someone who suffers from mental health problems, like, I'm never a fan of, like, let's kill the mentally ill person so their evil is gone from the world. I'm
right.
never a fan of that, like, trope of an ending.
You know what? Now that you say that, Neville did show some care for Tommy's character because after he was gunned down, he was saying to that other killer, like, I'm sorry, well, yeah, other killer slash cop,
The Freudian slip.
who was like, why did you kill him? He just needed help. He just needed mental help, and so maybe he has that viewpoint because he knows that he himself has mental health issues, you know,
I had
and he's
a more,
looking.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we're giving the writers more credence than they deserve, but just different ways of reading the movie.
Yeah, I had a way more cynical take on Tommy's murder. I thought
Okay.
he was mad the other cop killed Tommy in retrospect because he wanted to frame Tommy for all of the murders. And he couldn't go up and
Um,
kill Laura and frame Tommy if Tommy was dead or in custody.
well, fuck me. I actually thought he was caring for him, but it's more like like I was going to use him to set. I still needed him to set him up for all these kills, right? Yeah, that's
Although, if he kills Laura after that, the whole plan's kind of kaput, anyways.
at that point, like Tommy's already been murdered. He's like, maybe I'm not going to be able to tie all these in. I might as well just kill her now, sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. So,
So I don't know. The ending was not the strongest. It was not my favorite part of it. I definitely enjoyed the first half of the movie more.
first half,
Um,
definitely.
when we didn't know who the killer was, and it was possible that it was going to be like a um, Halloween one sort of thing, or a Black Christmas sort of thing. So yeah, it definitely hurt the movie for me. But overall, I kind of enjoyed it. It was a fun movie. It's not a perfect movie, but I
Yeah,
enjoyed watching it. I would definitely watch it again. I've seen it like 3 times in the past 4 days or
yeah,
whatever, and I enjoyed it every time. So yeah, what do you think of? I guess we talked about the writing already; it was
yeah.
uneven. What did you think about the direction, like the directing and the like cinematography? Like, what did you think about that?
I think it was good. I got a big De Palma vibe from it. It felt like a
Early,
Brian De
yeah,
Palma movie to me in a lot of ways, especially with the split personality ending. Yeah, I feel like it felt a lot like a De Palma movie to me,
okay,
which is a compliment. I like De Palma. I like his stuff.
yeah, and I think he, or I should say, the movie itself had had some like really nice cinematography at some points, but at other times it was just very boring,
Yeah,
right? Like you had this great subject matter that you can use, which is like photography and 70s like disco and models and fashion. And he didn't really use it. It was pretty straightforward, the direction. So it was a bit boring in that aspect.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But the acting I thought was great. I thought the cast was
Yeah, the
amazing.
cast really holds up. I feel like you see some 70s movies, like, I don't know who any of these people are, but like the top three performers in this, Brad Dourif, Tommy Lee Jones, and Faye Dunaway. I mean, Faye Dunaway was a legend already, but Tommy Lee Jones and Brad Dourif went on to have spectacular careers. They're
Right,
people you at least recognize the voices of instantly in Dourif's case, but you recognize Tommy Lee Jones anywhere.
right. That craggled face.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. I think the cast was everybody was cast perfectly. I think there's nobody I look at was like, I would have liked to see somebody else for this role. I thought it was great. So yeah,
yeah,
so overall, like what we do here is we rate the movie on a scale of 1 to 5 upside down crosses. So what would you give The Eyes of Laura Mars?
Can I give half crosses?
Yes, let me say that over again. What would you give Eyes of Laura Mars? I keep saying the, and there's no the in front of it. So, but yes, you can give half crosses.
I would say
So
like 3.5. 3.5 upside down crosses from me.
Okay. Yeah, that's a strong movie, right? That's a really strong movie. Like, imagine if JC would have, like, if they would have, I would have loved to see what they did, how John Carpenter's script would have looked on film, you know?
Yeah, I'd love to see that. I'd love to see what he did with the direction too, if he got to direct it.
Yeah, but like, who knows? Yeah, because he wanted to direct it, but like, if he did this one, who knows if we would have had time for Halloween or something like that, you know, which is terrifying. So, as a matter of fact, I take it back. Fuck, I'm glad he didn't direct this movie.
Right? Like, in retrospect, like, if I had to choose between having Halloween and The Eyes of Laura Mars, definitely Halloween. That's the one I want.
So for me, I think I'm gonna give it a solid 3. 3 upside down crosses. I really enjoyed it, but the unevenness of the script from beginning to end, and the unevenness of the characters, and kind of like the blandness in some parts of the direction, it took it away from me. Still enjoyable film. I would recommend it to anybody. I think it's a great representation of American giallo.
Yeah.
And why, if you like this, you will absolutely fucking love real, not real giallo, but like real or Italian giallo, I should say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd recommend it to anybody. I think it's a blast. It's a fun movie to watch. I would love to watch this on the big screen. I haven't had the opportunity to do that yet. But it's one of those movies that isn't talked about a lot, and I don't think a lot of people are aware of it, you know?
Yeah, I think it's one of those ones that kind of just slips through the cracks of history. Although I'm sure there's way more obscure ones. I feel like this one gets some mentions.
Yeah. All right, so what we do now is I will be absolving you of your horror movie sin. And
Perfect.
in order to be absolved, I will be suggesting 3 movies for you to watch as your penance. And then you have to watch those movies, and then hopefully you come back in the future and we can talk about those movies and some other movies. So, all right, Ryan. So these are the 3 movies that I would suggest to you for your penance. First, I'll say When a Stranger Calls from 1979. Great movie. I think you will enjoy that one. Then I have Body Double from 1984, a De Palma film, which we were just talking about De Palma earlier. And then from a newer one that I feel like I recommend a lot, but I just fucking love it. I want everybody to see it. Is Knife Plus Heart from 2014, and that's a French giallo movie. And so like giallo started in Italy, and then we brought it over to America, and then it got through the lens of America, made its way to Paris, or to France, I should say. And this is what they did with it. So Knife Plus Heart is a great, and it's also like an LGBT friend movie, you know, so it's great.
Okay, yeah.
So those are the 3 movies that I would recommend you watch. So Ryan, I just want to say thank you so much for jumping on the show. It was a hell of a lot of fun interviewing you. This was a great conversation. If you could please let everybody know where they could follow you, how they could support you, how they can buy your book, all that sort of stuff.
Thanks for having me on. You can find me at Twitter at RyanB4890. My book is linked there, but you can buy my book Saint's Blood on Barnes & Noble, Godless, or Amazon. And if you do buy it and enjoy it, please leave a review somewhere. Appreciate y'all.
And how about the podcast? Where can they?
Yes, I'm also the co-host of the Horror Hangover podcast. We're available at all major podcast listening spots. You can find us on Twitter, and we'll have some new episodes coming out pretty soon.
Oh yeah. And if you'd like to follow me, you can follow the show on Twitter at MHCPod. You can follow me on Instagram at myhorrorconfessional. If you'd like to email the show, you can email me at myhorrorconfessional@gmail.com. The music was done by Taylor Fox. She's going to be dropping her album with Great Hag. That's going to be dropping really soon. They just dropped the album artwork. So look out for that. The artwork we're back to the season 1 artwork, which was done by my good friend Cap Mikey. You can follow him on Instagram at Captain_Mikey_art. Also, if you'd like to support the show, we do have a Patreon. You can find me on Patreon through the notes for the show, or just search My Horror Confessional at Patreon, or the links are also in my bio. So,
Yes. Miguel, where did you put the money for the first month of Patreon?
oh
This
yeah,
is cool as hell, and you should brag about it.
thank you. So, as everybody's aware, there's an attack on reproductive rights for women in the United States, and we both live in Texas, and they're going a step further with that. And so we just wanted to do something to combat that as much as we could. And so all the money from the pledges from the first 3 months of the Patreon will be donated to Planned Parenthood for the first month. And then the second and third month, my wife is looking into other organizations that help uh, women of color within the Texas community. So we don't know exactly where we're going to be doing the second and third month yet, but we've already donated. We were able to donate $120 earlier this month, strictly through the pledges from this show. So thank you to everybody, and your Ryan included, for donating or pledging to the show, because it's going to a good cause, and we're going to continue doing that for the next 2 months.
Hell yeah.
So that's the show, sinners. We will talk to you next week. Peace.